We will bring the assembly meeting to order for June 12th, 2023. Ms. Hughes Candies, will you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Mr. Bryson, will you do our land acknowledgement?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Ganeshish.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Madam Clerk, will you call roll?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hale.
Here.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Treen.
Here.
Ms. Wall.
Present.
Walal Hidog is absent, and Ms. Kladashevsky.
Here.
Mayor Weldon.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. And Wahal Gadak has been our liaison to the Polynesian activities tonight, so we appreciate her doing that for us. Special order of business, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. These are the instructions for public participation, and for those who wish to participate via Zoom, the cutoff time for that was 4 p.m. this evening. We did have 3 individuals sign up to participate via Zoom. Those in the room, if you have not already signed up, there is a sign-up sheet at the back of the room. And if you have an agenda or a non-agenda item that you would like to sign up for, please do so at this time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I apologize, I'm looking through what people have signed up for and trying to match the ordinances with what's happening. Could I have Ms. Hake, Mr. Rosenthal, and Mr. Fleming come up here for just a second, please? All right. And we hear that you can't hear us in the back, so if we talk a little louder, is that better? Okay, thank you. And with that, we will go to approval of minutes. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval of December 12th, 2022 Assembly regular meeting minutes, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, they are approved. Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Manager, you have some changes.
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 agenda changes. First is item number 5 on the consent agenda. That's ordinance 2023-30, ordinance authorizing the manager to advocate and provide public information regarding the need for a new city hall. I'd like to amend the louder. I'd like to amend the manager's recommendation to say that the assembly introduce this ordinance and set it for a public hearing at a special assembly meeting on June 26th, which will happen prior to the committee of the whole. That's the first agenda change. And second, item number 14, which is the ordinance appropriating 8.1 million for the purchase of Juno Bone and Joint. I just want to alert the public that the manager's recommendation has changed from introduction, and the manager's recommendation is to refer this to the Assembly Finance Committee or Committee of the Whole for further review. And I would additionally like to set it for public hearing on July 10th. So that's item 14 on Bartlett, going to be public hearing on July 10th. And item number 5 on City Hall, a special assembly meeting on June 26th. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. So I don't see anybody signed up to testify on ordinance 2022-06, the $8.1 million for the purchase of Juno Bone and Joint Center. But if you were, you'd want to wait till July 10th to do that. So thank you, Mr. Manager. Anything further?
Nothing at this time. Thank you.
Okay, is there any public request for consented changes other than ordinances for introduction? Mr. Gnell. Nope. We'll get to you. Oh, I apologize. Thank you. Non-agenda items. And let's see here. We have nobody on Zoom. And let's see. Yeah. First we have Mr. Ignell, so come back on up. Apologize for that. So please state your name and area of town for the record and turn the mics, tap the mic so it turns green. And you have 3 minutes, and Madam Clerk is timing you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is David Ignell from West Juneau. Tonight, I want to talk about a very important issue: systemic racism in Alaska's criminal justice system. 40% of our state prisoners, both men and women, are Alaska Native. This is double the percentage of Alaska Native in the general population. There's a case here in Juneau that is symbolic of this racial injustice reflected in these prison statistics. The wrongful conviction of Alaska Native man exposes almost everything that is wrong about our criminal justice system. I've been told by the executive director for the Alaska Innocence Project that what you're about to hear is not unusual in our state. This man lived his entire life in Hoonah. He had no criminal record and was regarded as an honest and upright man by Klan leaders. He was twice tried in Juneau for an alleged crime, yet no Alaska Natives were allowed to sit on either jury. He was not tried by a jury of his peers and thus maintains his presumption of innocence under the law. His witnesses were mostly Alaska Native women from Hoonah. 2 of them testified that the accuser confided in them the allegations were not true. One was a school teacher, a mandatory reporter by law. The other was a best friend. These 2 women were not believed by the white jurors from Juneau. For the second trial, the judge forced a new and unprepared attorney from up north to represent this man. It was a completely unfair trial, a violation of ethical rules and the Constitution. On this fact alone, the man has a slam dunk case for a new trial. Yet his post-conviction relief motion has sat dormant in the courts for the last 8 years. Prosecutors were able to game the system because of underlying prejudice. This man's oldest sister, who earlier graduated from Temple University with honors while obtaining a master's in social work, wrote 4 years ago, quote, "They did it because they could," unquote. This man has spent the last 13 years in jail. The hardship on his family has been unbearable. His parents are now in their 80s. He was the only son in a family of 5 children, the only maternal uncle to his sister's kids. As you know, that's an important role in the Tlingit culture. One of his sisters, who some of you probably know, and several of his nieces and nephews live here in Juneau. It'll take 10 seconds.
You get 10 seconds.
This is a good family that needs your help. I hope you will take this matter up in your next meeting of the Systemic Race Review Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Ignell, have you brought this forward or proposed it to the committee, the Systemic Racism Review Committee?
I'm not sure how that works. I'd be more than happy to do that.
Maybe we can work on that. Yeah.
Do you want me to wait for instructions? Yeah, this echoes really bad to talk. I don't know if you can
Yeah.
fix that.
I can look into it a little bit too, and we can figure out a good.
Okay, thank you, Representative Smith.
Yep, thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Next we have, sorry if I pronounce this wrong, K Mel. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and the mic is green, so it's live, and you have 3 minutes.
K-Mel, downtown. Xiao de Neki, Gunufchi, Shagao, Kaak, Akagek, Kayi Sahaye. Respectful people, thank you for giving me this time. My name is K-Mel. I live at 850 Basin Road. I've been there for the past 20 years and in Juneau for most of my life. I'm a registered architect with 39 years of professional experience, almost all in Juneau. On May 23rd, the Planning Commission did a most unusual thing. They recommended a draft ordinance to the Assembly with a recommendation that the Assembly not adopt either the ordinance AME 2021-0008 or the accompanying maps prepared by Tetra Tech in 2022. The ordinance would amend the land use code related to avalanche and landslide areas and replace the avalanche and landslide maps currently adopted. There was extensive public testimony at the May 23rd meeting. The testimony covered a great many relevant issues and made clear that revision of the ordinance and adoption of the revised maps impacts a number of major policy issues, some of which will not be quickly resolved. If this comes before you, please devote appropriate time, energy, and resources to the underlying public policy issues which were not addressed by the draft ordinance. I appreciate you listening to my words. Without you, it would not be possible.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Wall?
Thank you, Ms. Mala. You spoke to policy issues that weren't part of the ordinance. Could you elaborate on which ones you're referring to?
Ms. Wall?
There are a great many policy issues involved. One is the use, people's use of their own land, the ability of the government to determine how people shall use their land. There's the difference between hazard and risk in terms of public policy and the regulation of the use of land. Those are some. I didn't wish to get into detail at this point because that could be quite extensive.
All right, see nothing further. Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Mary Alice McKeon. Please state your name and area of town you live in for
I
the
have
record.
some written comments and I have 10 copies, so one for the staff and one for each.
All right,
member.
go ahead and hand them out and you will have, yeah, you can just hand them to staff. They'll get them to us.
Send it on.
You'll have 3 minutes.
Do I have to push a button?
Nope, it's green. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I am Mary Alice McKean. I live at 212 West 9th Street, Juneau. I'm speaking on the same topic as K-Mel, but from a slightly different perspective. If the proposed Tetra Tech maps and proposed ordinance come before you, I am very concerned that the record does not contain some basic data which you need to make an informed and fair decision. And there are three, and I described this in more detail in my letter, but there are three questions which I think you need answered. I need them answered. First, under the current maps and ordinance, the the current ordinance, excuse me, what is the status quo? What is the baseline? Under the current ordinance, the assembly chose to prevent development that increased density in parcels in, quote, a severe avalanche area. That is map 4 of the current hazard maps. How many properties are currently in a severe avalanche area? Number 2, under the proposed ordinance, the assembly is being asked to prevent development that increases density in parcels mapped in a, quote, severe landslide area. How many properties would be subject to that limitation? Number 3, of those properties, how many are already in an area mapped as in a severe landslide area? And how many are properties that would be newly mapped as in a severe landslide area? In thoughtful comments sent to the assembly, Andrew Heist, a property owner, tried to figure this out on his own. He said he estimated that 220 additional properties would now be included in hazard area. But CBJ staff has this information and they can and should provide it to you. I think the reason why CBJ staff did not provide that information relates to the nature of the Tetra Tech maps themselves. The Tetra Tech maps themselves only describe natural features of the land. It is as if we were a Garden of Eden. As wonderful as our community is, we are not a Garden of Eden. There are houses and businesses and people all over the place. And you are being asked to make the Tetra Tech maps the basis for development decisions for land that already has, in almost all cases, stuff on it. And at a minimum, you need to know how what is being proposed affects what is already there. And that is not in the record as far as I have been able to tell.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. McKean? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Kim Metcalf. Please state your name and area town in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon, members of the Assembly. My name is Kim Metcalf and I live at 730 Gold Street. This past Saturday, I heard a great deal of traffic going by my house. I looked out the window and there was a convoy of 6 brightly colored rental tourist Jeeps. Of course, it was because the Basin Road Trestle Bridge was open after the repairs were made. Well, there goes the neighborhood. It was wonderful having the bridge closed because of the rock slide. As you recall, I've asked the city to close the gate near the trailhead of Mount Roberts year round. There is precedent since the city closes it during the winter months. Closing it will leave ample parking for people who want to climb Mount Roberts, and people can walk around the gate to get to other trails. I've asked many times that the city prohibit tours in the area because there's too much traffic through a residential neighborhood with very narrow roads, blind corners, and a failing roadbed. Last year on one day in mid-June, if you recall, there were 998 vehicle trips along the road, 499 going up and 499 coming back. To put an emphasis on the hazards of Basin Road, I'm quoting from the Juneau Empire of May 17th, quote, according to Tom Matisse, CBJ Emergency Programs Manager, the trestle area is not an atypical place for rock slides to occur. And he noted that there have been multiple similar events in the past. Matisse said though the repairs slated for next week are necessary, he expects the recent rock slide won't be the last time the trestle is damaged. The area has been and will continue to be active, and I'm quite certain rocks will move again. The question is how big, he said. According to city hazard maps, the site is considered to be in both an avalanche and landslide zone. Matisse said the city will continue to monitor the area above the trestle for any potential slides, but noted mitigation measures can be difficult due to the vast amount of terrain in Juneau where rock falls can occur. We see a rock fall all the time, and I'm sure we will see something like this again, he said. And that's the end of the Empire quote. So I'm asking you again, please consider closing the gate year round and prohibit all forms of commercial tourism along the road. I think the neighborhood deserves to be considered a neighborhood and not a commercial tourism zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Hale?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Metcalf, for joining us. When we were considering the e-bike proposal out on North Douglas, one of the interesting things about that proposal was that the proposer was talking about sort of self-limiting their hours on that road. And as it turned out, that didn't pass, but I'm wondering if you think that some kind of limitation like that, as we look at tourism in Juneau and think about how we want to manage it going forward, if some kind of limitation like that would help.
Well, I don't think that would help, because as tourism grows, and we've seen it just grow exponentially, you know, in the last, well, especially the last year since the pandemic was pretty much over. We're seeing more and more shoreside excursions because more and more people think they can make money off of tourism. And already we have the Gold Panning Tour, which has these big heavy buses going up and back. The other day I saw a luxury tour van full of tourists. I know Gastineau Guiding in the past has had a permit up there. I don't think they're doing that any longer, but it's just something you've got to put an end to, because, and it's not just tourists, as Ms. Treem pointed out several years ago, there are many, many locals that go up there. It's a very well-loved area of town. And, you know, our neighborhood is just hammered. And I just don't think it's fair. I mean, you know, they talk about getting money from the number of tourists that are on those tours. $3 a head is what I think Mr. Dindinger was getting. I pay over $6,000 between my property tax, sales tax,
Ms.
water
Metcalf,
and
you
sewer.
veered away from the question. Thank you.
Well, I'm just saying why I don't think, I mean, I think we should have some consideration as a neighborhood, and we just don't. So I want tourism to be, I want all commercial tours out of the area, and I want the road blocked, because then more and more people won't come up there. They'll say, well, there's nowhere to park.
Ms. Metcalf, I have to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank
But
you.
please, I really hope you'll consider doing something for us. Thank you.
Next we have Yves Soutier. Soutier. Please state your name and area of the town in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Yvette Soutier. I live at 634 6th Street downtown. I have 3 separate issues. I'm going to echo Kay Mel's comments and urge the Assembly to take great care to review the comments, both written and oral testimony with respect to the landslide and the avalanche maps from Tetra Tech. I also echo Mayor Alice McKeon's comments. More study is absolutely necessary, and the Tetra Tech maps should not be adopted by the Assembly when it comes before the Assembly. I'd also like to echo Kim Metcalf's comments regarding Basin Road. I'm a little bit divergent from her. If traffic is going to be allowed, we need to aggressively enforce the speed limit. It is absolutely imperative that that speed limit be enforced. It is 5 miles per hour on the Trestle Bridge and 10 miles per hour all the way up the road. There are children who are learning how to ride bicycles up there. There are dog walkers, there are joggers, there are runners. It's a multi-use area that needs to be enforced. It's not. The drivers who drive fast are incredibly aggressive, and I have actually been verbally assaulted by a couple of them when I tell them to slow down. Somebody's going to get hurt. Finally, I'd like to talk about Chicken Yard Park. I've submitted a written comment. I appreciate the Assembly members who got back to me and reached out on the topic. Basically, Parks and Recreation removed the plants bought by neighbors, and the neighbors who bought the plants replaced the salmon berries there. As you all know, I was kind of spearheading that. We hear that the plan is to replace them with the salmon berries. Just want to remind you and the public that restitution amount for those salmon berries was $2,068.79 for plants that you can get from my backyard. Secondly, they added labor costs. In short, our neighborhood does not want those replanted, and we've been very vocal. Right now, they haven't been replanted. We'd like it to remain that way, and we're willing to take over the garden and plant ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Carla Hart. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Carla Hart. I live on the back loop. Seattle Cruise Control recently observed that being a community tied to the cruise industry is a bit like being in an abusive relationship. Their needs are always more important than yours. There is a major imbalance of power. They gaslight you if you bring up a problem, and they isolate you from opportunities. I invite you to think about this in the context of Juneau. You have the role of trusted leaders for this community that is stuck in an abusive relationship with the cruise industry. Ignoring the issue will not make it go away. Not responding when community members reach out to you will not make it go away. Tonight, I want to talk to you again about the air pollution from cruise ships. Coming out of the ship stacks are nitrous oxides, which attack immune cells deep in our lungs, making them less able to protect us from infection and disease. NOx emissions undergo chemical reactions in the atmosphere relating to the formation of PM 2.5 and ozone. Sulfur dioxide essentially becomes battery acid when it reaches the moisture in your nose, throat, and upper lungs, burning them. Soot includes ultrafine particles that are so small they cross from your lungs into your bloodstream. These are identified as PM 2.5. These diesel particles contain over 40 known cancer-causing organic substances. Examples include polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, benzene, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, acrolein, and butadiene. As you've been told in recent emails from a West Juneau resident, DEC does not have adequate staffing for monitoring and enforcement of air quality. DEC did not have adequate equipment for proper testing of the air in 2018-2019. DEC does not have the authority to enforce on anything except opacity for air quality, which is not measurable under many atmospheric conditions that we regularly have. Further, ships have significant windows of time on arrival and departure when they can legally be streaming jet black plumes. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's not harming the residents of Juneau. State law is not protective of health of the residents. Further, recent studies are showing that even short-term exposure to pollution far below legal limits has adverse health effects. Air pollution can result in deaths, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits for cardiovascular and respiratory issues. Air pollution can exacerbate underlying health issues. There's not enough electricity in Juneau to get all the cruise ships off of diesel and onto shore power. I expect that in the background, there's a lot of effort going on a 5th cruise dock for Juneau. I strongly urge you not to allow the lease of Juneau Tidelands or Juneau submerged lands for a 5th dock until you truly understand and the community understands the health impacts of the cruise ships that are there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Hart? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Mr. Frank Bergstrom. Did he leave? It's on the consent. Please state your name, area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Frank Bergstrom, Lemon Creek. Start my time. Everybody on the assembly, good evening. Pleasure to talk to you tonight. I'm here to talk about, let's see, ordinance 2023-31, which is general obligation bonds per a new city hall.
It's an agenda item.
Huh? That's why I put them on non-agenda.
Madam Clerk, at the start of the meeting, I heard her say agenda or non-agenda items. You
Yep.
Don't mean to overstep my bounds. Is this
Yep,
allowed?
I put you on agenda because it's on the consent agenda. So go ahead.
Ready to go? Okay, great. We'll keep it brief then.
Let's not pull it. Let's just let him, since we've already passed that, let's just let him give his testimony.
Should you start your 3 minutes again?
Yes, please start your 3 minutes again. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, first point, the associated ordinance for $50,000 to for an ad campaign, essentially, as I understand it, to convince the voter to allow the city to raise our property taxes is somewhat troubling. And I'm wondering if it isn't possible that the city would want both sides of the issue properly illuminated. And so I would suggest splitting that with another organization that would, so you could have a point counterpoint on that rather than just simply have a very large sum of money used to promote the city's position. Second point, what we would really like to have an idea what the actual costs of this structure are. As of last week, it was a $10 million payment in the budget currently with $27 million going to a bond. And then for this meeting here, I saw 16 millions have already been budgeted with 27 million going to a bond. Last year it was 37 million going to a bond, but the city engineer produced a memorandum pointing out how the construction costs for projects of late have been 1.7 to 1.8 times the actual professional estimate. So does that mean that we're probably looking at 37 million all in times 1.8? I don't know. And I would presume that you would want to know too, so that we can get a good feel before we fund it, exactly what we're looking at. Fourth point, I did a little NPV or net present value analysis of the two options of the 2022 election versus or proposal and the 2023 proposal that's in front of you now. By my calculation, it comes out to the same thing, nominally $44 million when you factor in the time value of money, interest paid, and it depends on the depreciation rate, of course, or I mean, so interest rates that are used. So if those two things really are so similar, I'm having a hard time seeing how this proposal is any different than what was turned down last year. Last point is much more info is really needed on the cost comparison on maintenance. We really don't know what the maintenance pool is for the city. There's much talk about how there's too much maintenance to be done on this building to justify its retention, and therefore you need to build a new one. We just don't see the data, and not that the data aren't compelling if we saw it, but we'd love to see those data as to how many things, what is the accumulated fulfilled maintenance requirement for the city, and is the city managing that maintenance properly, or are we just letting our structures fall apart to the point that we have to rebuild them? So those information or that data, that information would be extremely useful prior to proposing a bond issue to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Bergstrom. Would you mind sharing your net present value calculations with me or the assembly?
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just so everybody knows, it was on the consent agenda this month. And our next assembly member, it will be up for public hearing on that topic. But since Mr. Bergstrom was here tonight, we allowed him to testify. Thank you. Is there anybody I missed on non-agenda? I don't believe so, but. All right. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there any public request for consent agenda changes other than ordinances for introduction? Seeing none, is there any assembly request for consent agenda changes? Seeing none, Ms. Wall, you have something to tell us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted folks to know that I had a potential conflict of interest as relates to resolution 3028, which is item J8, a resolution amending the City and Borough of Juneau personnel rules because it applies to Tier 4 city employees. My spouse is a Tier 4 city employee, but after speaking with our city attorney, we decided it was, or she decided recommended. It was not a conflict because there are about approximately 400 other CBJ Tier 4 employees.
All right, thank you for bringing that out. With that, we will go to assembly action. Ms. Gladys.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would move the consent agenda as amended with the amended recommendation regarding item 5, and I would ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that brings us to public hearing. Madam Clerk, item 13.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is public hearing on ordinance 2022-6, version B, AU, an ordinance appropriating $30,000 to the manager for the deferred maintenance capital improvement project, funding provided by school district operating funds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
This ordinance would appropriate $30,000 to the CBJ Deferred Maintenance CIP for Thane Warehouse building repairs. Juneau School District has agreed to pay $30,000 of the installation fees associated with the overhead coiling door at the Thane Warehouse. Installation of this door provides improved access to the property stored at the warehouse. Maintenance repair costs are considered instructional in nature and therefore will be funded inside the cap from school district operating funds. I recommend you adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Is there any member of the public who wishes to speak to this ordinance? Nobody has signed up, so we will move to the assembly. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the assembly adopt ordinance 2022-06 BAU, ordinance appropriating $30,000 of the manager for divert maintenance on CIP. I ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Dream.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to object for a question really quickly. Isn't the Thane Warehouse where our voting center is, and why is it being paid for out of the school district's budget?
Thank you, Ms. Dream. Mr. Manager is pointing to someone in the back.
Mayor, I'm looking for Director Kester for a little bit of help on the why, but yes, the Thane Warehouse is where our election center is housed. I'm not sure I'm going to get help from Director Kester, but the building is used for storage of materials by CBJ and the school district. And it sounds like the school district agreed to pay for a cost that helps them access their stored materials.
She gave you the 2 thumbs up. She must have answered okay. Any further objection? And you remove yours? So seeing no objection, this ordinance passes. Madam Clerk, item 14.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2022-06 version B AX. An ordinance appropriating $8,100,000 to the manager for the purchase of the Juneau Bone and Joint Center building at 3220 Hospital Drive, funding provided by hospital funds. And this was the item that was requested by the manager to be referred to finance or COW and set for public hearing at the July 10th meeting.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager, you still going to read your report?
Mayor, I think the operative point is I'm requesting that you refer this to finance or committee of the whole and set for public hearing on July 10th assembly meeting. Thank you.
All right, I'm assuming it would probably go to finance since it has to do with money. Is that the will of the body?
If you guys want a July meeting, we can do that.
That's a tough one. We'll see where it will fit in best. How about that? All right. Are we done with this topic then, Mr. Manager? Okay. So that will move us to item 15. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-26, an ordinance creating a short-term rental registration program and providing for a penalty.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
This ordinance requires owners to register the location and occupancy details of each individual short-term rental unit that they operate. Registration of individual short-term rental units has 2 objectives. First, registration will assist CBJ Sales Tax Office in ensuring compliance with sales tax and hotel bed tax requirements. And second, registration will give the assembly and the public greater visibility into the number, type, and geographical distribution of short-term rental units. This ordinance does not require registration for any dwelling units rented for longer than 30 days. The ordinance also provides for a penalty if owners publicly list short-term rental units without having properly registered those units with CBJ. I also recommend that when you debate this, in the ordinance, you change the effective date to 90 days after adoption, which will provide for time for operators of short-term rentals in the finance department to bring this program on board. I recommend you adopt this ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay, we have lots of public testimony on this. So first, we will go to the Zoom land. And so please bring over phone number ending in 5956. Or Laura Powers. I can't see that she's there.
I do not see a phone number ending in that number or that name.
All right, we will see if she comes back in before the end of that. Then please bring over Mr. Spratt. Hello, Mr. Spratt. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Aaron Spratt. I live in the Valley. It appears once again that CBJ is overreaching their authority. I find it interesting that in this ordinance, in the previous reasonings for wanting to have a short-term rental, the primary reason was a housing crisis, yet there's no mention in this ordinance of that being a reason. You do mention wanting to have greater visibility for short-term rentals. We don't need the government to do this. Airbnb, VRBO, these are private companies and they do a great job. They do so good of a job that you have stated that you will use a third-party company to monitor and identify perpetrators of breaking this registration, contract. I have a question. Why do you not incentivize, if you want the public to have behaviors that you want, why not incentivize these behaviors with tax breaks instead of fining people with penalties? I would want to know, why do you want more tax money for what? I think many of us in the community know why you want more tax money. And then I would ask this, why is this type of business in need of a special tax compliance and oversight compared to any other business that operates within City and Borough of Juneau? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spratt. Any questions for Mr. Spratt? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Mary Ann Ray. 0874, last 4 digits. Oh, I'm sorry. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes. You're still on mute.
Ms. Ray, in order to unmute your phone, you would need to press *6.
You're still on mute, so *6.
I just *6.
Okay, now we can hear you, although there's quite an echo.
Yes, 1 second here and I'll take care of that. Well, what a little bit of excitement here. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Sure. My name is Mary Ann Ray. I'm living in Douglas. I would like to agree with much of what Mr. Spratt said. I would also like to say that if the purpose of this is to collect taxes, there are better ways of doing it than putting such an onerous burden on small rental, small renters. The issue here is more than trying to go after the couple hundred people that it would appear from the study that came out with the meeting agenda. There are several hundred people that are making rentals, and the city is having trouble collecting taxes from them. I understand that part of it, but there are also pieces of this that are not, they're burdensome in wanting to have registration numbers shown on advertisements. And there's a lot of control in here that is being applied to what ends up being, in most cases, just small mom and pop operations. So I would like to see this suggestion tabled and brought back for review, including industry members in that review process, so that something can be formulated that really addresses the concerns, which are not 100% clear in what's being proposed here. But I think there are some valid concerns. There's no need to address them in this way, and I think the industry has something to offer in bringing it back and having it reassessed with a different group of people. So thank you. I give back my time.
All right, any questions for Ms. Ray? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our first speaker is now on.
All right, so please bring over our first speaker. Ms. Powers, you are on. Please unmute yourself, *6. And you are still muted. So hit *6. There you go. Can you hear us? You are unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Laura Powers, and I'm on Fritz Cove Road. Thank you, Assembly members, for the opportunity to testify on short-term ordinance. I am a property manager for long and short-term properties in Juneau for the last 20 years. I support the proposed ordinance, as this will allow the city to collect the taxes that are due. According to Fannie Mae, the root of the housing shortage goes back to the housing bubble collapse in 2008. Many home builders went out of business and new home construction dropped like a stone. Fewer new homes were built in the following decade. By 2019, a good estimate of the shortage of housing units for sale or rent was 3.8 million units. Fannie Mae says that addressing housing supply will require different, highly localized strategies to provide more housing. I think there is a solution, and I propose that the Assembly appropriate the money collected from short-term lodging tax to fund infrastructure development and open land to build apartment and multifamily housing, partnering with Tlingit and Haida and or other nonprofit organizations. Our local strategy should be to use the funds to create more housing stock using local nonprofits. I think it's a win-win solution. Again, I appreciate you.
All right, you faded at the end, but I think you said you were done. Any questions for Ms. Powers? Sorry, Ms. Powers? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all we have on Zoom. So Tom Williams. The mic is still on, so please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the Assembly. Thank you for letting me testify. My name is Tom Williams. I live in Ock Bay. where my wife and I, since 2007, have operated a vacation rental. We, at that time, when we started that, we came to the city, registered our vacation rental, showed them our business license, and have paid all of our vacation rental taxes that were required, sales taxes, as well as bed taxes, even when you raised it to 2% or to another 2%. What we operate is not only a short term, but in the wintertime, we operate a long-term rental. I support the intent of this legislation that would ensure that we being the city and borough, collect all of its rental revenues, the sales taxes. And however, this goes well beyond that. And for that reason, I'm going to recommend that you do one thing. Well, you could do another thing. You could turn it down, but I doubt you're going to do that. The one thing that I recommend is that you send this back to an assembly committee and you get the operators involved with what this should do. And I think you will get 100% support of this if you actually talk to the operators, as opposed to having a top down, oh, well, you've got to do this and this and this because the city thinks it's a good idea. It's unnecessarily burdensome. You can get to the same spot relative to sales and bed taxes without making you requiring you to file each year, without providing a whole bunch of information about what you are offering. I mean, who cares? Why would the city care whether my amenities include a coffee maker or a blow dryer or a TV or anything else? It's way too broad-based. It just doesn't make sense. The other thing that, you know, if this is designed simply to do sales tax, I'm 100% supportive, but this still goes beyond that. The ordinance collects good information, and even as suggested by the manager in an article a little while back ago, well, the city may consider limiting short-term rentals, which is a bad policy. Keep CDC out of this. You don't need the good information. You do need to collect the taxes. And I encourage you to send this back to the assembly. It can come back up. And by the way, I will gladly volunteer to make recommendations as to make this far more palatable to the operators and still make it a lot easier, less intrusive. Sorry, do my timer. I was trying to time myself. Yeah, well. Sorry. Again, this is an expensive way to do this, not only for operators, but for the city. It makes unnecessary requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Williams, for your testimony. Quick question, is there a particular piece that, just speaking to the onerousness of this, is there a particular piece of the ordinance that you would want us to, could you elaborate?
Thank you very much, Madam, through the mayor. Well, there's several of them. One, a requirement for an annual registration. You know, when things change, sure, we should be required to let something know. You know, if we add a place or delete a place, there's no. And second, there's no reason to have any listing of amenities. This is a CDC want, so that somehow down the road you can get good information and start to control or overreach. Let's focus on the taxes, and like I say, I'll be fully supportive of that, and not make it so burdensome on everybody.
Okay. I see Ms. Heller, do you have your hand up? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I do intend during further discussion to get more of a sense from staff what this registration form questionnaire will look like. I guess I just wanted to confirm with you. You mentioned the coffee maker thing. Have you heard specifically about something of that level of detail, or is it just from this line of the ordinance, you know, saying a general description, include address, property type, number of bedrooms, capacity, amenities. Is that what drove the coffee maker?
Absolutely. And there's no
Okay.
need for that. Now, I can agree that you ought to say, okay, this is the address. That's reasonable. And why would you need to have a phone number, a 24-hour phone number for short-term rentals as opposed to a 24-hour phone number for long-term rentals? You know, I guess the short-term rental crowd is just a whole lot more rowdy. And I've never heard any issues about that. I think that's a supposition that people threw in there because, but in any rate, you've got my phone number. You've got my email address. I registered with the city. You've got that information. Let's not complicate this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? All right, thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Brenda Heimbigner. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Renda Heimbigner and I live downtown Juneau, where I've operated a bed and breakfast for over 20 consecutive years. I'm also a current taxpayer. I'm here to ask the Assembly to send the proposed ordinance 2023-26, which I believe is before you, either to committee with industry operatives or throw it out. As currently written, it poses undue burdens to both operators and CBJ and is based on a report containing misperceptions and challenges. It's also unclear whether CBJ is attempting to increase tax revenue with this proposal or enforce existing sales tax collections. Either way, the proposed ordinance lacks the input of professionals in the field. Whatever problem it is that CBJ is having with short-term rentals, it is better to invite collaboration for best practices. And I believe the proposed ordinance does not recognize the end goal, which is a stable economy for Juneau. We are business people with a tremendous stake in the stability of commerce in Juneau and always look forward to discussions. We are your partners. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Blaszewski?
Thank you, Ms. Heidegger. Thank you for testifying. And you say you've been a bed and breakfast. Are you we have zoning rules about bed and breakfast. So are you actually a permitted, you went through the DLE and you went to the planning commission and you got a bed and breakfast. So that was way more onerous than this. So,
Back in
right.
2004, I did
Yeah.
that. And that's a real good point that you raise in that bed and breakfasts are different from short-term rentals. Bed and breakfasts, the current requirements are that the owner live on site. Thus, you have no wild parties. Everything's supervised. Yeah. And you're able to enforce your own, or what do you call it when there's a curfew? Yeah, your own curfew for the neighborhood.
Right.
And so anyway, that was a good point you raised.
Yep. I just wanted to make sure. Great. Thanks so much.
All right, any further questions? All right, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have John George. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is John George. I live on Fritz Cove Road and I have a bed and breakfast. My first notice of this ordinance was yesterday, and I haven't had a lot of time to prepare, but it occurs to me that if I rent for 29 days, I'm subject to this. If I rent for 31 days, I'm not subject. That doesn't seem fair. The detailed property information, what this is very wide open. It doesn't say what it is. So we need to have better definitions of what we're really talking about for this. I live on property, so some of these things don't really bother me, but I'm wondering, does this apply to hotels and motels? Because they're short-term rentals as well. Doesn't really say that, but looking at the definitions in it, it looks like maybe it does. Anybody answer that question for me?
It's your turn of testimony.
Okay, thank you. And then my last comment is that, gosh, we had a couple of things go on recently. We had Iron Man, where the city was begging people to open up their houses and rent a room to people so that we could host a large event. We have Folk Festival, which I assume has the same opportunities for individuals on a one-time basis to rent their room out. We have Celebration, another opportunity where major people come into town. Is this going to stymie that, or are we just going to look the other way? I know the city has a hard time collecting tax. Every year I look at the newspaper and I see 3 pages of people that haven't paid their taxes. There must be a better way to collect that than you're asking for the small operators. Let's go after the big guys who owe $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. George? Mr. Smith?
Madam Mayor, I'm going to just ask this in the form of a question because that's the time, but I want to be responsive to one of your questions, Mr. George. Had you seen the exemption section of the ordinance where registration is not required of hotels required to keep a register under Title 20 and tax pursuant to Title 69?
I did not see that. And this is the first time I've actually seen the ordinance, and so I haven't gone into very specifics, but
I just wanted to raise that in this.
But then I guess my question is, why not?
Again, unfortunately, this is your turn to testify, not ours.
I understand.
Hopefully we'll address those to the staff. All right. Thank you, Mr. George. Okay, next we have Dawn, and I apologize. Doolewand? Doolewand. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Dawn Dooley-Bon, I am on Douglas. I wanted to start off saying that I've been a Juneau resident for 15 years. I've worked in a myriad of industries here, including tourism, small businesses in Juneau and the state. I have been an Airbnb host since 2019. I pay my sales tax, I pay my occupation or bed tax, I pay a business license, I pay exorbitant property taxes, and recently an increase in water and sewer. I personally think that independent travelers are a benefit to the community and economy. They spend money on accommodations, restaurants, groceries, coffee, tours. They show a tangible interest in the community, the environment, and Juneau's history. When I was alerted by another Airbnb host at 10 p.m. last night that this meeting was happening, I wondered why, since all I ever hear is look local first, support local businesses. And despite the actions the city takes to the contrary of that, I'm local. I live here year round. I work here year round. But when the city takes steps to hinder my income, which is necessary to live in such an expensive city, it reminds me of the actions the city has taken to put seasonal people first by supporting the cruise industry, when local interest groups sought a cap on passengers and to have a 1 day a week be ship free, by dedicating the majority of downtown parking structures to legislative and tourism permits. And instead of supporting downtown businesses, and by making those spaces available to the public. And also by not issuing an official statement to protect things like the Mendenhall Lake from motorized boats and other detrimental changes that would only benefit tourism pockets. If this proposed hindrance on Airbnb hosts is about the lack of long-term housing, perhaps the city could turn its eye towards the decaying buildings standing empty downtown that are cost prohibitive to bring up to code. The planned housed subdivision on Douglas by Outer Point that became delayed once talk of a second crossing started up because it also would increase property value. Or the fact that the Terry Miller building was recently approved to be converted to housing, but only for the legislative staff that may use it up to 5 months of the year. Additionally, I've tried renting to locals. And because I don't charge exorbitant prices, I happen to get people that come in and damage my property. They abuse drugs and almost burn down my house. And I can honestly say that if Airbnb went away, I still wouldn't rent to locals because of the treatment that I've had. Before this meeting, Mayor Weldon took the time to speak with me on this proposed ordinance and stated that the city originally suspected 250 Airbnbs in Juneau, but when the city hired someone to look into it, it was found there was closer to 500. When I asked why this registration was needed when we have business licenses, she said that not everyone is honest about their business license. I ask you, will people who aren't honest about a business license going forward, or just the honest people, be hindered by this? I had a lot more, but my time's up.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have folks we can't applaud. I'm sorry. She did a good job, but we can't applaud. Next, we have Michelle Hake. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Hake and I live on Back Loop. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a realtor and I own rentals in various states. My husband and I relocated from Georgia, and for over a year now, we've been fortunate to call Juneau home. I request your open-mindedness in considering the broader implications of the proposed ordinance and its potential for increased restrictions over time while not solving the deeper issue at hand. What we are discussing today is in essence redundant. All short-term rentals already require a business license with penalties for non-compliance. Implementing an additional fee would require allocating resources for monitoring compliance and addressing potential violations. Furthermore, this new fee merely adds to an existing penalty structure. The underlying motive of the city seems to be gathering data. A contractor has already been hired to acquire information, and their presentation repeatedly emphasized the limited and inconsistent data available. However, that data is readily available via the short-term rental websites. The rationale provided behind requiring all the additional information is to facilitate easier monitoring of code and zoning violations, as well as linking sales tax accounts to parcel numbers and owners. However, since we already obtained a business license, our sales tax is already associated with it, rendering this proposed monitoring redundant, just like the fine. Allow me to shift our focus and jump ahead and speculate a little bit of what I believe will quickly follow if the licensing ordinance is adapted. I have witnessed the consequences of licensing short-term rentals in Georgia. It has been the initial step taken across Georgia and, as a matter of fact, the nation to implement restrictions with the goal of addressing housing market issues. However, the efforts were unsuccessful. The city has already conducted a study last year, which examined the causes of Juneau's escalating affordability and housing availability crisis. The findings revealed that the primary factor affecting Juneau's housing crisis is demographic changes within our population, not the short-term rental market. If this needs to be further discussed, I would like to propose that we temporarily postpone this discussion and reevaluate it later this year. Airbnb serve as a solution for the overflow that hotels cannot accommodate, especially during summer. And we also have a new apartment complex being constructed behind Fred Meyer, which will offer 84 additional units for long-term rentals, set to be completed by October. Let us observe the positive effects these new units will have on our housing market before making any hasty decisions regarding short-term rentals. And I am clearly nervous to speak in public.
You did great. Any questions, Ms. Hale?
Thank you very much for your testimony. You did great. At a couple of points, you mentioned a fee, and I wondered if you were aware that there is no fee associated with the registration.
I think what I meant to say was the fine of the $25 a day.
All right, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Hake, for your testimony. Next, we have David Rosenthal. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, David Rosensteel, 9605 Marine Way, Madam Mayor. Okay, I agree with this registration. I think, looking at the studies down south, it'll reduce 30% of your people that aren't paying your taxes. But my worry is what is the next step? We're going to give you all this information. What are your next steps? I know this group didn't get together and go, hey, we just want to put our toe in the water. There's probably step 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that's what this group is concerned with. Another thing I noticed on here was contact information from noise complaints, emergencies. My rentals go through Airbnb. There's a background check on everybody that goes through there. I had one person that had a fine for their dog that couldn't rent my house. She had to have her fiance do it. So they restrict who's renting your houses. So for me to have to give me my emergency contact, it's like I'm 13 and my parents are out of town. It makes no sense. We get into size and amenities. Once again, somebody else mentioned amenities. I have at least 68 amenities per both my Airbnbs. For me to list that's ridiculous. You want to know anything about my rentals? That's on Airbnb. All the information is there. Size, bathrooms, square footage. I mean, it's all there. And I really think that this group could look at, we talked about it. You guys had mentioned a third party to look at. You look at a platform like Airbnb, it is all there. It's all tight. I get quarterly, I get my taxes listed out and it breaks down how much is set aside, 14% for this group. I mean, I could staple that to my paperwork and send it to you. It's all there. And I'm probably middle of the road in this group, but last year I sent you guys over $31,000 in money off my business. Okay, so I mean, you look at this group, I'm probably middle of the road of that. It's just, we're all trying to do the right thing here. I noticed hotels were exempt, which I'm still scratching my head about that. You know, one thing with shortage of housing, we got to look at building more. And I don't know if the state can trade with federal land to do that. There has to be more housing. You can't penalize people that came here with $1 million, bought property and trying to run a business and giving you quarterly paychecks. We shouldn't be penalized for that. And as mentioned before, I think there's a lot of really smart people in this room. And that if we work together in the future on this, we meet again, there's a way to solve this. Not just putting our toe in the water tonight. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rosensteel? Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Cameron Fleming.
Thank you.
Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. And you have.
My name is Cameron Fleming. I live at 9635 Moraine Way, just next to Mr. Rosensteel. I don't own an Airbnb. I live next door to a couple Airbnbs. I've had nothing but pleasant experiences from the people that have stayed there. We see them all the time. They're very friendly. They're quiet. Previous owners of the property have had rentals there. Both of the Airbnbs were rentals before. And there was loud parties, a lot of noise all the time, all hours. And that has calmed down. Now and then we hear some people having a barbecue, but they're enjoying themselves. They're very friendly people enjoying Juneau, Alaska. I am much happier. My wife and I are very much happier the way it's run compared to the rentals. Now, okay, off that, if you want to get to creating housing, if that's what this is all about, I'm not sure if it's creating housing, creating taxes, whatever. I'm not worried about the taxes. I listen to Dave all the time talk about the taxes. The thing about the housing here is They say there's no land to open up for housing. I drive around here all the time. I've lived here 33 years. There's a lot of land that can be opened for housing. The problem is nobody wants to build affordable housing. Everybody says they're going to build affordable housing, but what they mean by that is building $400,000, $500,000 homes. And then the people that own the $250,000 homes will move into those and put them up for sale. But then the 250,000 homes all of a sudden become $400,000 homes. And this is all working wrong as far as what the rules have been for the affordable housing thing. So if this is about housing, there's lots of land around here. Now, I don't know if it's all federal, state, city owned. I don't know what's what, but that needs to be looked in for that. But I am in support of not regulating these Airbnbs anymore. These guys, I know what Dave does. And it doesn't need to be more regulation. Less regulation in government is better. Thank you for your time.
Any questions for Mr. Fleming? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Joanne Walls.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm going to have to read really fast to get through my points.
Okay, remember to state your name and area of town you live in for the record, then you have 2 minutes.
My name's Joanne Wallace. I'm a lifetime Alaskan, a Juneau resident for 40 years. I live in Lemon Creek. I've sold real estate in Juneau for 17 years. I'm also the administrator of the Juneau Housing and Rental page, which has over 16,000 members. I have 4 rentals in town, 1 short-term rental in Juneau, as well as a short-term rental in Idaho and rentals in South Dakota and Fairbanks, where I'm from. I kind of want to dispel some of the rumors that people have on short-term rentals. I feel like they're getting the blame for the housing shortage in Juneau. There's a housing shortage nationwide. This isn't exclusive to Juneau. And as the JEDC study pointed out that Michelle referenced, it's an aging population where people are living alone. There is a housing shortage, but it's not exclusive to Juneau, and short-term rentals should not bear the blame for that. First of all, the short-term rentals fill a great, it fills a housing niche for Juneau in the same way that regular rentals do. We have people that come here to work for the summer. There's people that like to do long-term or short-term rentals in the summer and then rent to the legislature during session. That's important. We have people that like to rent to people that come here to work in the tourism industry. That's important. You know, all housing is important. So who's dictating what's more important than the other? Short-term, one other thing I wanted to point out that I haven't heard is that sometimes short-term rentals are just spaces in someone's home. They would never be like a legal apartment. Some people have like a extra bedroom in their home with an outside access door that they rent. These would never be normal rentals, but these are all important rentals that should be encouraged. All housing is important. And in a lot of ways, I feel the city has been their own worst enemy for density. As a realtor, I'm very familiar with the limitations the city puts on people for adding apartments. They say they're going to make it easier all the time. It's never easier. I just had a client, he bought a house that he was going to fix up and he was going to turn the basement into an apartment. He contacts the city, goes through the process. After 2 months, it took him 2 months to come back with, so where's the parking going to be for your rental on a 13,000 square foot lot? And the second point they had was, well, the 1,000 square feet is too big. So instead of pursuing that, my guy's like, I'm not going to spend another 6 months fighting the city to try to get this done. Forget it. I'm not going to put an apartment. But this is constant. This happens all the time. I have a couple really important things to say.
Can you email them to us?
I just feel like I really feel like there's a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge on Airbnbs that the city really needs to listen to. The avalanche zone, you know, restricting housing.
Ms.
in
Wallace, I have to
yeah.
cut you off. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
wow.
Any questions from Ms. Wallace? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Kelly, and I apologize for this, Baloo. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kelly Ballou. What else? My name and my what?
Area of town you live.
Okay, I live in Twin Lakes area.
Okay, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a real estate broker and I provide long-term and short-term rental services. This ordinance really concerns me. I think the city should include the industry to solve the concerns. We don't really know what the concerns are. They weren't, stated in here. But the solutions that are here are not, they're not reasonable. And a lot of things don't make sense. So there's no, we can't figure out, a lot of people are speculating as to what's the purpose for this ordinance. And so it's not stated or explained. And for the various requirements in the ordinance, there's no purpose listed either. So why do we need a registration number? We have a tax account and we can be identified via the tax account. Why do we have to have this number in every ad? And sometimes it isn't even feasible because a lot of us wholesale our space through websites such as Airbnb, and so Airbnb and Vrbo have this space for this number, but a lot of these other platforms don't. I went on and looked for Seattle because I just searched for what, municipality has a registration requirement. I don't know if they must not have a fine associated with it because I noticed on Vrbo and Airbnb, these registration numbers were there, but when I went to various other booking sites, I couldn't find a registration number anywhere. And I don't, so booking.com doesn't even control. They write their own description, so I can't even just stick it in my description. But, why does this, what's the purpose of needing this private property information, including the amenities? And why does city care if I, what I provide for, what I'm selling? My only guess, because I'm trying to figure out, well, what's this for? My only guess is so that you can monitor resale certificate activity. It hadn't occurred to me to apply for a resale certificate, but it makes sense. Maybe that's what people are doing. And, they're getting tax-free on their paper towels and toilet paper. And so now the city wants to figure out, are you offering it to your guests or is this just for your own household? That could be a purpose. We don't know what the purposes are. And what's the purpose for this 10-day tight time frame for any kind of, if you make any changes, you have to notify the city within 10 days. If I don't add laundry soap, or if I decide I'm gonna stop renting a room because I want to change it into an office and I don't tell the city within 10 days, I'll be fined $25 a day per unit. It's onerous. So the only place that there really was a purpose listed for one of the requirements, and that is for the contact information. So just in my last 2 seconds, I'm just going to say that I contacted TBMP and asked to be included, the short-term rentals to be included. It worked great for tourism, for all the tours and transportation. It could be great for this situation too. But industry could help you solve these problems. So you should ask us and we could provide you lots of information.
Thank you. Any questions, Ms. Hale?
Excuse me.
Ms. Baloo?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your testimony. You mentioned that the registration that's required in this ordinance is unreasonable. Can you tell me what part of that is unreasonable?
So it's always different, various requirements, including, having it in the ad, having it, this 10-day time frame. The operator definition is problematic. Having to do the amenities, the 24 hours of contact information. All of those things are very onerous. And I think that it doesn't make sense to require you to have it in the listing without knowing if it's even feasible to do it, and how are you going to do it? How is everyone going to be able to comply with this? So it has to be worked out on how, that requirement could be worked out, and then a $25 fine because the platform decides they're going to change something. And then now all of a sudden this page isn't even there. And now my number's gone, so a lot of things can't be controlled, and we need to figure out how to work it out. I don't mind as many people said.
That's good. Thanks. Okay. I do have a question for the city manager, ma'am.
Go ahead, Ms. Hale.
Perhaps you know the answer to this. The fine on page 4 of the ordinance is listed as $25. Is that $25 a day, or is that just a flat fine of $25?
Mr. Watt.
Mayor, it's per incidence. So I think if you go to 6940-030, there's a description in paragraph B of that.
What you speaking louder?
6940-030 on page 3 of 4, paragraph B. Describes how that $25 would be assessed.
Anything else? Thank you for your testimony tonight. Next, we have Robin Gates. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Robin Gates. I live at 8217 Cedar Drive. I currently am registered with the city to have an Airbnb city license. You have all my information. I've paid my taxes every quarterly. So this whole thing actually came to my attention this morning, and I've been working and quite frankly up late. So I haven't really been able to prepare except read this information while I'm sitting here. I wonder about the registration. Why are you requiring this of the Airbnbs, but you're not requiring it of the hotels? You're not requiring it of the cottage industries? Are you going to end up requiring it of any other industry within the Juneau community? Or is it just going to be something required of the Airbnb community itself? And why are you doing that? And if you're going to have the only people that are coming forward are those that are honest about what they're doing. The honest taxpayers of the Airbnbs are the ones that will be registering. The honest taxpayers of the ones that pay the taxes are the ones that are actually being chastised, I guess. So it just seems that there's a discrimination going on here. And I think that should be resolved. The other thing is, it's apparent to me that there's a lot of things that are not clear, the registration, the fine, I did seem like it was $25 a day. I mean, it might be per incident, but I mean, today is an incident, tomorrow's an incident, the next day is if you see what I mean. So it just seems like it needs to go back to the board. You guys need to revisit this, talk with the Airbnb people and see if we can come to a better scenario that would be beneficial for us, and maybe take us honest taxpaying individuals and give us perks, and those that aren't so honest figure that one out, because they're, I can understand you needing your taxes. I don't mind paying them. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm getting kind of kicked in the backside I have had a permanent rental, and I can tell you, I had it totally trashed. And to have an Airbnb and to go in it every day and clean it and to evaluate it is so much more simple than maybe once a month, every 6 months, whatever. So the people that come in have always been so respectful. So I find it more pleasing to handle an Airbnb versus a long-term rental right now.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today, Ms. Gates.
Madam Mayor, I realize maybe just before, I probably should have done this at the beginning, but I should make a disclosure, I think. I operate seasonally in short-term rental, my primary residence. So I should disclose that. I've spoken with the city attorney. It's broad enough that I should be allowed to continue to participate, but I should disclose that early in the discussion. Sorry for not doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Okay, next, if I have this right, Stan Lee. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record.
Stanley, Douglas, Alaska. Thank you
have
for your
3
time.
minutes.
And I got to read quick since we got the time. As Airbnb short-term rentals feel they're under attack, Airbnb, VRBO, and many other sites, as one gets restricted, another will rise. So where is the middle ground and where does it stop? As you know, it's an expensive place to live. Property owners have a right to subsidize their income with expense on the rise, while providing tax revenue for our city. Having and maintaining rental property in Juneau is very costly, as some know. Landlords deal with higher expenses here in Juneau than other places, from maintenance, property taxes, water and sewer, to extreme dump fees when a tenant goes bad. Should we restrict or dictate to a property owner who they may choose to do business with, and at the same time assume all the costs that come with it? Are we going to tell Home Depot or Costco they cannot sell to non-locals? As we are all in a form of business together, that is what property rentals are. These platforms are also used to find long-term tenants as well. So we cannot restrict people from using marketing to the fullest. So when you look at the websites, who is looking for what and who is not? How will we separate the two? There is a balance between these platforms if used correctly, as they are needed. These platforms will fill the void where other accommodations are not available or feasible. Nonprofits, State of Alaska, and other government agencies also utilize these services when available. As I do feel there should be some regulation and restriction to a degree with caution, without additional costs and burden to property owners. For example, a single family home or condo should not be allowed or purchased for these platforms, as that is taken away from what Juneau does need. Registration should be per property parcel, not a listing, as one location might have multiple listings. If registration was per property owner, the city has all the contact info on file already and easily accessible. Limit to property owners only, as they can be held liable, versus a sublessor has no liability or responsibility to the neighborhood. Listings should be managed by a property owner, as this would reduce multiple commercial listings as well. So, also, we should also look at people that rent mass units just to lease them for Airbnbs. That is taken away from Juneau and from rentals that are needed. It is a balance we must find that can be done without targeting or discriminating towards one business or another. Registration, we are in support of. It should include the person if the person that is registered as Airbnb or a short-term rental, are they the property owner or are they the leaser? If the registered party is the leaser, registration should have property owner and the property owner's approval with the property owner's contact info on the registration. Can I finish the last sentence?
Yes, you can finish last sentence.
Okay, amenities for everybody to know is considered business personal property tax. It should be reported. Give us a short form, because if you have 10 Airbnbs, you are running $80,000 of business personal property that tax is owed on. And we are for annual registration and updates.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Lee?
So.
Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. All right, next we have Dale Anderson. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Dale Anderson and I live on Oak Lake. First, thank you for your service. Many long years ago, I sat where you sat, you sit now. And I know the sacrifices of time and effort it takes to make decisions where there are friends and neighbors on opposing sides and being expected to show the wisdom of Solomon in coming up with equitable resolutions. I have owned and operate Oak Lake Bed and Breakfast for 27 years. I think Renda and I are in the running for the longest bed and breakfast in Juneau. I'm here to give my personal opinion related to that proposed ordinance. Ordinance 2023-26. Been operating since 1997 without any violations or complaints from CBJ or neighbors. I heard that the CBJ government, I heard this last night, is contemplating a new rule that is designed to catch the bad guys who are running their businesses without collecting or forwarding required taxes onto the CBJ. I find that objectionable that you are placing these onerous restrictions on my business that I've run totally above the board according to CBJ guidelines in order to catch quote unquote the bad guys not paying their taxes. Creating another hurdle for me to climb over is a threat with a threat of penalties is anti-commerce. It has been recognized as a slippery slope by one of your members. I hardly agree with that opinion. Once the door is open, what further ordinances will be considered? As you know, government has a way of incremental growth and intrusion into our personal lives and commercial enterprises, and I'm concerned about that. It would be simple and much less expensive if you hired a high school student to scan the internet and find people who are advertising but not in compliance with existing tax codes. I ask you, please do not open this door. I ask you to vote down the proposed ordinance if you're going to vote on it tonight, or table it and give industry an opportunity to meet with you and come up with some better resolutions. Taxes are not our money. They're money that we collect and pass on to the city and borough. And I support those taxes because those taxes advertise for me to bring clients into Juneau. So I'm not against taxes. I agree with Tom. I think if you get industry here and talk about it, you'll find virtually 100% support for what you were trying to do. But I just think you're overstepping right now and not having a clear ordinance.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Thank you for your testimony and your service. Next, we have Greg Anderson.
Greater honor I've never had. My name is Greg Anderson and I live out the road. I'm speaking up against the short-term rental registration program. I am starting a one-unit business attached to my home in my upcoming retirement, in part to pay to keep my house in light of recent rampant property tax hikes. This is an unnecessary and overreaching use of city resources. The solution to the affordable housing situation is as plain as the nose on your face. Turn over abundant city land to those who want to build apartment housing and reap the tax revenue. I know it's more complicated than that, but I think that the simple fact gets lost in the politics. Targeting small business owners is not the solution to this problem. One class of small business owner is being singled out for regulation, penalties, and paperwork. I would bet my bottom dollar that the clientele of short-term rentals are far less likely to generate noise or other complaints compared to longer term tenants. As mentioned earlier, the websites we use are review based. If you're a problem renter, you are weeded out, unlike long-term tenants. This program is a solution in search of a problem. This requirement is a slippery slope toward regulation, restriction, and who knows what else control over a small business that provides needed flexible housing options and tax revenue into the city. Tax revenue collection is important, and it is the job of the city, and enforcement is as easy as looking online. Short-term rentals cannot exist without advertising. So it's an easy thing to find a tax cheat. You go online, you find their building, you can see their address. Are they registered with the city tax rolls? Done deal. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Anderson? The younger brother. Thank you for your testimony tonight. Okay, and then we have Hannah Davis.
There.
Hello, please state your name and area of town you live in for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Hannah Davis and I live in downtown Juneau. Over the past 3 years, I look at the MLS every morning with my coffee. And especially during COVID, when the interest rates were so low, I saw a lot of houses being bought and sold. I also saw a lot of those houses not going to my friends who were looking to buy at that moment, but in bidding wars and ending up on Airbnb. I was lucky enough to purchase a house in 2020. I am lucky enough to operate an Airbnb out of it after having a year-long rental that turned into a nightmare like many of us have experienced. I think that this registration is a good idea. I think that having a registration number on your Airbnb will make it a lot easier for that high school student to find exactly who's paying and who's not with that number. It'll make it a lot easier for them to be able to find that. And I do think the city deserves metrics on our current housing issues. Yes, property is a problem, but if we are lucky enough to own property in this wonderful city, then it is our job to be transparent with the city as well. When it comes to emergency contact numbers, I went to a garage sale this couple weeks ago and they had a fire in their Airbnb in the middle of the night with guests staying. If CCFR cannot get in contact with you at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're off somewhere else while your house is rented, that is an issue. So just that one safety might be cause for some concern, and definitely concerned me. And I called AEL&P about, my electricity coming into my house, because that is a terrifying prospect that I would never want a renter to have to experience. I do think that there should be a split somehow. What we have is fine and I'd vote for it now, but I do think that people renting individual rooms out of their own homes should be on a different level with those of us that have complete separate rental spaces on our property. I own a duplex. It's nice to be there. I have never had issues with our renters. So that is great. Current tourism projections for Juneau are great as well. It's only supposed to go up and up from here, pandemic pending. And so when it comes to the possible sliding into extra taxes, hopefully as Airbnb owners, we should be able to recoup some of that cost with the upturn in tourism that is projected. The registration does not pose a barrier to entry right now. You can have as many Airbnbs as you want. I think that's awesome. If you want 10, that's super cool. Anyone can get in. It doesn't cost money to register. I do think that putting in maybe like a 5-year registration instead of a 1 year would be nice, just for absent-minded people like me to, kick it down the road a little bit. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Davis? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank
you. Is there anybody who signed up that I missed somehow? Because we had a few of you. All right, we appreciate everybody's testimony. We are going to take a 10-minute break. I would encourage folks to stick around because I'd imagine some assembly members want to talk to you. Madam Clerk, I took notes on the back of one of the lists, so I'll just write that on here. No, never mind, they're on there already. They're on there, so I picked the right. Yeah. Can you hear me now back there?
I hear you.
Okay, good, because I don't have to yell anymore. Okay, last call for public testimony, for real this time. Okay, can we please have James Brook to the front, please? Yep, and please touch the mic so you make it green. State your name and area of town you live in the record. You have 3 minutes.
James Brooks from West Juneau. I wanted to speak in favor of the ordinance and echo the comments of Hannah Davis earlier. It took quite a bit of effort for my wife and I to buy a house here in Juneau. We had to make an offer. It was sight unseen for her. We waived the inspection. We offered above asking price before it even went on the market in order to make it happen. And right now we have 2 friends who are visiting Juneau just temporarily. They're people who used to live here, but grew frustrated when they couldn't buy housing and moved away. Both of them are professionals and would like to live here, but they just can't find a house to buy. And I think there's a lot of people in this community and outside of this community who would like to live here, but can't. And I do think that the growth of short-term rentals is a contributor to that problem. I know the city is working on it. The ordinance is a first step towards fixing that problem, and I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any questions for Mr. Brooks? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Victoria Godkin. Please state your name and area of town you live in for the record. And you have to touch the mic to make it green there at the bottom. Nope, has to turn green. There you go. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Victoria Godkin. I've had long-term rentals in this town since the 80s, and I've definitely lived through the ups and the downs of them. I also worked at the sales tax office, so you should have most of the data already. There are always going to be people who don't play by the rules. I don't think you have to introduce another ordinance to be able to get the information or the taxes. I've been told it's not about taxes, but the information that you need, but it's usually always about the taxes. And the cost of collecting this $25 per day and finding out who is not reporting is onerous. We used to charge a $10 a day for a card for a resale certificate. And it costs you guys more to process those $10 a day resale cards than the $10 per card than the $10 you get. I would like to know how much it's going to cost to monitor this $25 violation. Because just for the example of the $10 card, resale card, you're losing money. And you've been losing money for years. I worked at the sales tax office over 20 years ago. I guess I'm dating myself, but the shortage of housing in Juneau, there was a shortage of housing in the 70s when I moved here. So here we are again. And I have to say, I agree with the person to open up some of the city's property to be developed. It'll also help the city's financial situation. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Godkin? Thank you for your testimony. All right. That's the last we have. So I guess it's up to the assembly. I hear there's some amendments. Do we want to do amendments on the fly, or Ms. Gladaszewski said we could do it on the June 26th Cal? What's the will of the body? Ms. Treem?
Well, I think somebody should make a motion. I mean, okay, I'll move it then. I move ordinance 2023-26. And I would offer some amendments.
Okay, any? Mr. Bryson.
Madam Mayor, I would amend that to move that to the CAL.
Okay, we're gonna have a process issue here, I can tell already. So Ms. Tree, we'll come back to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would object to that. I think what was not in the manager's report for this is the fact that the idea of short-term rental registration has been discussed before at many meetings. I think the first time was at least a year ago in a finance committee meeting. So I think it's ripe and ready. Also, I think this sounds like it's going to be news to a lot of people in this room, but last week at our committee of the whole, we gave the manager's office direction to bring us back ideas for short-term rental regulations. And we're not going to be able to do anything with those without this registration program. So I would like to get it done sooner rather than later. And I think it's in pretty good working order and that we can get it good to go tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Treem. Any other objection to Mr. Bryson's amendment? Ms. Hughes Candies and then Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to object for similar purposes as Ms. Treem. We've been looking at this registration for a while, or certainly talking about it, not looking at this particular ordinance, but we've talked about the idea of registration. As people noted in their testimony, we started out by hiring a third party. I think this is at a point where I'd like to make an amendment if someone doesn't beat me to it based on some of the testimony that I heard to improve the amendment or improve the ordinance overall. But I do feel like we're at a place where with a simple amendment on the fly, this can be ready to be voted on tonight.
Thank you, Ms. We have Ms. Wall, Ms. Hale, and then Mr. Bryson.
Madam Mayor, I'm okay.
Ms. Hale.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to speak in support of Mr. Bryson's amendment to move this to the committee of the whole. And I absolutely agree with the former two assembly members that we have been talking about this for a year. And this has come up in many, many meetings. But what I see and hear tonight is that there are a lot of people who didn't know about it. And you have to follow what's going on in the city in different ways to be on top of things. And for that reason alone, I would like to move it to the committee of the whole so that we can actually have more time to communicate with people and for people to communicate with us and discuss this one last time before we bring it back to the assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving me an opportunity to speak in favor of this. We have been talking about it. We are going to do some level of registration, but our first shot out of the gate has indicated that the way that we're going about it is problematic to the businesses that we're asking to register. So taking their feedback, giving us a little bit of time to think, okay, what do we really need from them? Having the free flow discussion that we can have at Cal, I think that we can bring this back in a package that the public will understand, that the users will understand and be able to comply with. Let's make sure we get this right and honor the people that are going to have to adhere to it. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. And I will also speak to the amendment. To be honest, I thought I had a pretty good handle on this. And I didn't think I thought it was pretty benign, but listening to everybody tonight, I can see that we need to hear from the industry, and through a variety of reasons, apparently you guys are just hearing about it now. So I think we should give you guys time to have your say on this. I mean, it would be pretty simple to make a couple quick changes, but I appreciate the conversation ahead of the meeting, and I learned quite a bit. So, and then during the testimony, I learned a lot. So I will support Mr. Bryson's amendment. So with that, we have an amendment and objection. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is on the motion to refer ordinance 2023-26 to the Assembly Committee of the Whole. Mr. Bryson,
Yes.
Ms. Hale,
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies,
No.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Treem,
No.
Ms. Wall,
No.
Ms. Gladysevsky.
Yes.
And Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Motion carries 5 yeas, 3 nays.
Thank you. So for those of you who are interested, please let us know your thoughts in email or reach out to us in other ways. Ms. Hale or Ms. Shevsky, if you have something.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to say anything. I agree with everybody actually on this panel. I think we could have done this. There are some minor amendments I would have made. I think we probably all would have made the same ones. But it's always hard to do all the technical words at this time of night. So it's one meeting and we can do it in one meeting and come back here. So it's not too much of a delay. And I also agree with the people who say if we are going to do any kind of regulation or further, we have to do meetings with the industry. I mean, this is simply a registration. So and it was meant to be a registration and anything further is a different story. So one meeting, I think, is okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So appreciate everybody's testimony tonight. And we will. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I just want to say very briefly, because that was, whether we move this forward or whether we don't. And had we started amending things, we would have gotten into it. But sometimes you come out here and I know it can be a pain in the butt to sit in City Hall all night and sit over there, and it can make you nervous when you didn't think it was going to make you feel nervous. So I really sincerely appreciate everyone taking the time to share your thoughts. And as Ms. Stream said at the CAL last night, it's been our intent. This is a bite of one piece of the housing problem. And I agree, it's not the entire housing problem, but as this assembly wants to work on this housing pretty passionately, we do intend to collaborate, and please be involved in the process, because data is a first step, because we don't want to take steps that are wrong for Juneau, but please stay involved as we continue to intend you working on this. And thank you for being here tonight.
Sorry, Mr. Anderson, we can't take any more testimony. All right, with that, we are moving on to unfinished business items. You'll have to ask it another time. Sorry. So it should be on the June 26th COW and then whatever the next assembly meeting is. Hopefully that was your question. Item 16, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-16B, an ordinance establishing the rate of levy for property taxes for calendar year 2023 based upon the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
This ordinance establishes the mill rates for property taxes for 2023, which funds a significant portion of the city and borough of Juneau's FY24 operating budget. Charter requires the Assembly to adopt by ordinance the tax levies necessary to fund the budget before June 15. Mill levies presented in this ordinance support the manager's FY24 revised budget as amended by the Assembly Finance Committee. As part of the budget review process, the AFC reviews, amends, and recommends to the Assembly the final mill levies. For FY24, the Finance Committee recommends a decrease of 0.40 mills from the FY23 adopted budget, resulting in a total mill levy of 10.16 mills, the components of which are the operating mill rate, area-wide 6.2, decrease of 0.4, roaded service area 2.45, flat from FY23, fire service area 0.31, flat from FY23 adopted, operating total 8.96, a decrease of 0.40 from FY23 adopted, debt service 1.20, flat from FY23 adopted. Total millage 10.16, a decrease of 0.40 from FY23 adopted. An opportunity for public comment was provided at a special assembly meeting on April 26, 2023. Finance Committee reviewed the mill rate ordinance at its meetings on April 5 and May 17, 2023, referring the amended ordinance to the full assembly for adoption. I recommend you adopt this ordinance as amended by the Assembly Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'm going to pause for a minute while I ask the attorney a quick question. All right, we only have one person signed up to testify. Mr. Williams, please come up. Tom Williams, please come up. Please state your name and area of town you live in again for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Tom Williams. I live in Ock Bay. First thing I'm going to say is thank you for sending that prior ordinance back to Cal, and I hope there'll be an opportunity for a roundtable discussion as to what our recommendations would be to make this work. With regard to the mill rate, a while back, I sent each of you a request that you significantly lower the mill rate. My understanding is that several assemblies ago that there was the finance chairman said that they should not change the mill rate to anything other than what would maintain the overall revenues. I think it was David Stone at that point in that assembly. And I think that should have been a good starting point. I don't know that whether the assembly has asked about that or not. But in the fact of the matter is that even though there's some reduction, and I will thank Assembly Member Smith for his efforts to reduce that, and I appreciate Assembly Member Wool's actual response to my letter, or to my email, that I think you have to realize that what you're doing is with a mill rate that increases our taxes. And when the city has so much in reserves and will probably add to reserves, just doesn't do well for families that are struggling with already large increases in their cost of living. Seniors bent on they're subject to limited revenue, their retirement. And what does that also do? It pushes up the price of housing. So while I doubt that you will do that, I wish you would further reduce that and further reduce the mill rate and just try to be more reasonable is all. Think of you don't work for the city. You work for the people that pay the taxes. And when you take too much from them, you can start to get some grumblings. And I'm sure you've heard it as well. And especially when there's 19 to 40% increases in assessments without some sort of adjustment to a significant adjustment to the mill rate, their taxes are going up significantly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Williams? Ms. Gladysevsky?
Will you indulge me an unrelated comment to Mr. Williams about the COW? It's not about his testimony.
Sure.
Just Mr. Williams, there won't be a roundtable discussion, but if you or anybody in the entire city has any amendments or comments, you can send them to the assembly if you would. We'd appreciate it.
We will certainly do that, and thank you very much.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Thank you, Ms. Wall. I didn't understand what you were trying to tell me. We will go to the assembly, and I think since Ms. Tree went out of turn, we'll come back to Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-16B, an ordinance establishing the rate of levy for property taxes for calendar year 2023. And since I got out of turn and no one can stop me because my mic's on, I was going to object to make a comment, but I will just, well, I'll object to make a comment. That's cleaner. My comments are more for the assembly, I guess, than anyone else. We have heard about rising assessments and different people experiencing pain of taxes. We hear a little bit of that every single year. I do think the mill rate should be reflective or should be flexible to what happens with assessments. If assessments went way up, it should really be reflective of what we need to fund the city. And so if you found out you're going to need too much, why wouldn't you lower it? I don't think there's some good idea to keep bumpers and keep it in a tight region. So I don't necessarily have a problem with moving the mill rate, but what I do have a little bit of a problem with is when we go through the budget and we adjust the manager's budget to make it our own, and we adjust his recommendations for setting it to make them our own. I feel like as financial stewards of the city for the time that we sit in these chairs, that we have to pay for what we add to the budget and know what we're doing. So for instance, I voted for things to add to our ongoing costs. And then I know that if those aren't in the manager's budget, that's going to need to be reflective of the taxes. So I just want to caution us, because I feel like over the years, in the limited years that I have been on the assembly, I don't think you can have both, where we add to our ongoing costs and we also look for the lowest mill rate. Those two things, just the math doesn't add up. And there are folks on here who will be on here longer than I will. So I'm just saying, as a math major, you got to choose what you want. And there's nothing wrong. Some people would say the best government is the smallest government. We get asked that when we run. I think the government should be the size that the citizens are willing to fund the services that they want. So there's nothing wrong with adding to ongoing costs, but we just have to have a mill rate that will pay for those ongoing costs. And with that, I'll remove my objection.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Any further objection? Ms. Stream?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll also just object briefly for the purposes of a statement. And I wasn't at the Finance Committee meeting where the mill rate was discussed, and I would have said those things then, but I agree with the things that Ms. Hughes Candies said about, our responsibility to be good fiscal stewards. And I don't think that this combination of mill rate and budget does that. And I also would like to say good tax policy is counter-cyclical, and we're doing the opposite of that. And at the Bartlett retreat last weekend, Melanie Shiven said that the Southeast business climate survey she does, this is the best it has ever been. And that was the current business climate, and that business owners in Southeast, they have the same optimism for future. So I think that, responsible fiscal policy would say we should not be deficit spending at the moment. And disagree with the overall combination of choices that we've made, but I know I'm in the minority, so I will remove my objection.
Thank you, Ms. Treem. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll add on to my colleagues' comments just to add that we also have been in a position in the past based on good fiscal decisions that previous assemblies have made that have allowed us to take advantage of opportunities when they've come to us. And that has been fruitful, I think. And so I am afraid that we are not going to be in a position to take advantage of future opportunities or deal with challenges that are on our horizon. We have done a lot to work on our recruitment and retaining our staff, and we will see if that is enough to make sure we can continue to have employees that stay and want to work here. I know we have several departments still that are in dire situations, so I'll remove my objection, but wanted to provide that for thought as we come into the next year.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate the comments by my colleagues, and I know that I'm in a slightly different position than my colleagues. I think that I feel very comfortable with what we came up with, where to find that $1 million essentially that going down to 10.16 will cost us. We have the money for it this year. I also firmly believe that good fiscal stewardship also means that we address what our taxpayers have been paying and are paying. And we have gone through many years. In fact, this is my 5th year on the assembly. And I think every year that I've been on the assembly, our sales tax estimates have been low, and we've collected more millions dollars more in sales tax than we projected. And that may not continue. We have heard from our former finance director that maybe we're leveling off, and that's a good thing. But because that has happened so many times in the past, and because assessed values went up so high, I think that also is good fiscal stewardship to not continue to just endlessly tax our people and then have that extra money at the end of the year. Thank you.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While I completely appreciate and agree with having a balanced budget, I'm in the same boat with Ms. Hale that 0.16 only left us $1 million gap, and we've seen how sales tax was probably going to fill that. So I felt quite confident that we passed a balanced budget this year, even though it was just a little tight. The one thing that I'd like to include that you guys haven't said, because everything all of you said is correct. However, the thing that I was looking at is that it was a tax raise because of inflation to the population. And rather than hitting them with the full force of the inflationary effects that the city's been hit with, that the whole world's pretty much been hit with, we made the tax increase in Juneau the smallest tangible number that we could make it and still have a relatively balanced budget. If we find in next year's budget cycle that was an incorrect decision and that our expenses are still outpacing the taxes that we took in, well, we did a smaller increment this year of increase, and next year we would have ability to do a smaller increment if the economics are saying that. If we went and did as big a bump as we could this year, and we found that, oh no, that still wasn't enough, and we did anything that we added on next year would just be that much more painful. I saw this as the softest way to raise everybody's taxes. Nobody wanted to raise taxes. We're in an environment where it's necessary, and this was the gentlest way that I saw this assembly being able to accomplish that. So thank you to everybody. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Gladysevsky.
Well, everyone's going to say something. I'll say something short, quickly. Just that we did pass a balanced budget. We didn't put as much in savings as we wanted. So as we would have wanted, and we do have a good amount in savings because of the past assemblies and the past city managers and the past staff that have saved money. I mean, we have an incredible system here that has been working for years. And so we were in a really fortunate position because of, and I'd like to do that for the next assemblies so that they're not all having to cut terrible things. So we passed a balanced budget. We lowered the mill rate as much as we could to provide the services that people asked for, as Ms. Huskandy said. So we're the only body that has to think about everything, about economics and housing and what gets paid for and how much you collect in taxes. And it's, as Mr. Anderson said, something good. I wish I could remember what he said about that. I'd repeat it, but anyway, thank you for your service for figuring it out. And I support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Any more objection? Seeing none, this ordinance passes. Item 17, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is Resolution 3016, Version B, a resolution adopting the City and Borough Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2024 through 2029 and establishing the capital improvement project priorities for fiscal year 2024. And please note your red folders have a corrected version of that resolution in your red folder.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
This resolution would adopt the capital improvement program for fiscal years 2024 through 2029 as required by Charter 9.4 and list the capital projects that will initially be appropriated by ordinance in FY24. Public Works and Facilities Committee reviewed the preliminary CIP at its March 6, 2023 meeting and forwarded the plan to the Assembly. CIP resolution was introduced at the April 5, 2023 Special Assembly meeting and referred to the Assembly Finance Committee for deliberation. An opportunity for public comment was provided at the Special Assembly meeting on April 26, 2023. Finance Committee referred the amended resolution to the full Assembly for adoption at the May 17, 2023 meeting. Charter requires adoption of the FY24 CIP by June 15. I recommend the Assembly adopt this resolution as amended by the Assembly Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Manager, and I have no public signed up for this ordinance. So we will go to the Assembly, Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the Assembly adopt resolution 3016B, a resolution adopting the City and Borough Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2024 through 2029 and establishing the capital improvement project priorities for fiscal year 2024. And I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? That ordinance passes. Item 18, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is ordinance 2023-14, Version B, an ordinance appropriating funds from the Treasury for fiscal year 24 city and borough operations.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager.
This ordinance appropriates $536,244,200 in expenditure authority for the City and Borough of Juneau's FY24 operating budget, excluding the school district. This ordinance appropriates all transfers between funds that support operations, debt service, and capital projects, as well as the associated expenditures within the funds themselves. This ordinance also recognizes $504,360,300 of forecast revenue and transfers in and decreases fund balances across all funds by $31,883,900. Forecast revenue and draw from fund balance are sufficient to fund the budgeted expenditures. The original ordinance was introduced at the April 5, 2023 Special Assembly meeting and referred to the Assembly Finance Committee for deliberation. An opportunity for public comment was provided at the Special Assembly meeting on April 26, 2023. Finance Committee referred the amended budget ordinance to the full assembly for adoption at the May 17, 2023 meeting. Charter requires adoption of the FY 24 operating budget by June 15. I recommend the assembly adopt this ordinance as amended by the Assembly Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And I have no public signed up for this ordinance also, so bring it to the Assembly. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move ordinance 2023-14B and ask for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'll actually object to this one for purposes of a statement. And but my statement will be very brief. It seems like at this meeting tonight that we're whipping through these all. And I just want the members of the public to know that we have spent the last 2 months every Wednesday together for several hours working on these topics. So this is not something that is just whipped out tonight. We have spent a lot of quality time together to make this happen. So, and it eventually balanced in the end. So thank you all to the Assembly for all their hard work, and our lovely esteemed finance chair who happened to miss the last meeting, just noting that. Anyway, I'll remove my objection. Seeing no further objection, that ordinance passes. That brings us on to new business. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the request to purchase city property located adjacent to 11260 North Douglas Highway, fraction of Lot 2, U.S. Survey 3559.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Watt.
In May 2022, the manager received an application to acquire city property from John and Suzanne Reiswig, the owners of 11260 North Douglas Highway. The application is for roughly 3,000 square feet of city property adjacent to the applicant's 11.6 acre property, and states that the request is being made in order to secure more road frontage on Douglas Highway, North Douglas Highway. City property is a large 92 acre parcel transected by North Douglas Highway. The requested property is managed by the Lands Division, and the 2016 Land Management Plan designated this property as retain/dispose. The plan also states that this property could be utilized for a future residential subdivision. Lands Housing Economic Development Committee reviewed this request at the May 2nd, 2022 meeting and forwarded this application to the Assembly with a motion of support for disposal. Planning Commission reviewed this application at the September 13, 2022 meeting and recommended approval of this disposal. I recommend the Assembly pass a motion of support to work with John and Suzanne Reiswig towards disposal of city property in accordance with 5309-270.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. This is kind of a little different one. So who has questions? Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question, why did this take so long to get to us since the Planning Commission reviewed it in September?
I see shrugs, but who's taking that?
Mayor, I don't know, but quite likely it is our land disposal process. So it's it can be a slow process. So the initial step is a owner comes in and fills out an application requesting to purchase city property. The first question that happens to the Assembly is go forward or do not go forward. If the Assembly says go forward, then the applicant who's requesting to purchase city property has the burden of providing enough information for review. So I'm guessing that the property owner took a while to get the information necessary for the commission. And then I'm guessing probably our commission agendas also take a while to get on. A little bit of supposition in there.
Ms. Wall, you have a
admittedly.
follow-up?
That's helpful, and you don't need to get the answer to me now, but it looks like the Planning Commission reviewed this in September, and so there's been a long period of time since when the Planning Commission saw it and it came to the Assembly.
Ms. Hughes Candies, our liaison.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can speak to this a little bit. And the shortest answer would be that we have Mr. Blydorn and Miss Duckworth. That's it. I say that only because the process, our lovely flow chart that we have that we're all somewhat familiar with, of all the different places it has to go when we dispose of city land, is that went to a prior lands committee. That's how long that had gone. And Mr. Blydorn wanted to bring it back to our lands committee to make sure just that everyone on this assembly was familiar with it. And he apologized profusely of where things had gone. But the simple fact is he can only work on so many projects at once. And so this got moved a little bit because I'm sure we told him all speed on XYZ. So that's a big-ish part of it.
Thanks. And I wasn't trying to shame anyone, just always curious where we're missing capacity. So thank you for that answer.
Ms. Gladysevsky.
Just wanted to ask the chair of the current lands committee. So did it go to you after the planning commission? So it went to so after September, it went to you at some point. Is that correct? And
yes.
And you reviewed it and talked about it.
Yes, we had we had the recommendation from a prior lands committee, and we had seen all its passport stamps along the city. And then we re-looked at it, got another chance to ask questions and sent it on.
Follow up, Ms. Glass.
I might ask you the question I was going to ask the manager. The CDD director isn't here, right? Is that correct? So the staff recommended against disposal of this property, and the planning commission, and I apologize for not looking up the minutes, but do you know why the planning commission said yes? Did you have that, in other words, did you have that discussion in lands?
Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thank you. We did not have that discussion in lands, but Ms. Lane, I think some of that is in the packet, but Ms. Lane might know because of working with the planning commission. So she was likely at that meeting, but or maybe can point us to the right page.
Ms. Lane.
I don't think it's on.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's, I believe all of the information that the planning commission had is in the
Need to
packet.
speak up just a little.
Oh, sorry. I believe all the information that the planning commission had is actually in the packet, as well as, the directors.
Yes, Ms. Lane, I know that. That's what I'm saying. The information that went to the planning commission was to recommend denial.
Correct.
The
That was
planning
there.
commission didn't do that, but I don't see the planning commission's stuff in here. So I'm just wondering what happened there. In other words, I'm asking because the neighbors had a big property. It's not like they have a small little parcel. They have a big property, but they want city land extra. So I'm trying to understand what the planning commission's reasoning was.
Thank you, Ms. Gladysevsky. Ms. Lane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I think it's hard to sometimes explain why the planning commission does what it does. And, they talked about this in detail at their meeting, and ultimately they decided that this was appropriate, and they thought that it should go forward. I mean, it was a long discussion, and Director McLean did recommend against it, and she spoke at length against it, and the planning commission went against her recommendation and decided it was a small piece of property and that they supported what the person wanted to do with it. And it was listed as retain or dispose, and they felt that meant that they could recommend either one.
Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just try and illustrate the two viewpoints. So in the director's report to the planning commission, starting packet page 184, the director noted that the applicant had been remiss in providing information to show why the disposal would be found supportive of the comp plan. And if you go to packet page 214, essentially the property owner wanted more frontage to create a lot without using the 11+ acre parcel. So I think a lack of information from the applicant led to the recommendation for denial. And I think the commission supported it, generally wanting to support most anything that could lead to a housing project.
Thank you for that.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in the report or whatever, in the packet, there's something saying, this could lead to 14 units or something. I mean, is that what they're actually like proposing to do? Or is that just we could maybe do that and instead they could just build one, large house? Like, anyway, what is that? Yeah, could you tell me like,
Mr. Watt?
yeah, tell me what's going on.
Mayor, so the action that the assembly is faced with is whether or not to sell 3,000 square feet. It doesn't require that the purchaser or proposed purchaser do anything. It just allows them to buy that 3,000 square feet, and future development of the land is an open question. And they've shown on that package page 214 why they think that 3,000 square feet is necessary. The 11 plus acres at the zoning district out there certainly does afford a lot of housing opportunity, but I'm not aware that there is actually a development proposal at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I'll have a question too. Help me understand why someone who has 11.6 acre property needs 3,000 square feet. What is the public purpose of that? I just cannot get there on this one. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. I was at one of the committee meetings and the applicant spoke about their desire to not share a driveway with the newly created lot. I think you can derive public purpose from that as you will. A new lot with a not shared driveway probably has a marginally higher value. So there might be a value to the public in higher property tax. Other than that, I can't really guess. I do know that the surveying burden on the proposed purchaser of the property will be a bit heavy because the 3,000 square feet would come out of a large unsubdivided tract. So there would be a benefit to the city of that surveying effort. I think those are the best arguments that I can give you.
Okay, and I have another question since nobody else is. The land we're giving though is attached to our property that we could give to a housing development. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And we have no knowledge that they're going to do a housing development for sure. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's proposed at this point.
All right. Yeah, I'll save my comment till we make a motion.
Okay,
Ms. Gladysevsky.
I'll make the motion. I lost my page on the thing. I would move that we support the disposal of city lands to John and Suzanne Reiswig and have the manager work on that. And I will speak, I guess, in support. I'm a bit reluctant. I have to defer to the planning commission, who I presume at the hearing got the public purpose. Their minutes weren't online, so that's what we charge them to do. But this does trouble me because the 11.6 acres is big, and seems like they should be able to do whatever they want with their 11.6 acres without getting 3,000 square feet of city land. But I'll stop talking.
Any objection? Ms. Hughes-Candies.
I'm gonna object for, I guess, a comment. I don't know how the rest of the body feels of, this. It was pointed out, this has been sitting around. And like I said, when Mr. Blydoren brought it to us, if I was looking at the city calendar right now, I don't know how much harm is done to the applicant by waiting for one more assembly meeting session. I agree. It gives me the same pause, and we did not get into this issue. And I don't know if Ms. Hale remembers that their assembly if they or at that lands committee if they did. It is a chunk of land, so just in general, anytime there's city land that we do control, that could be turned into a subdivision or given to a housing organization, like don't love giving or don't love breaking those up if they make them unable to be housing, just because we don't have, they're not growing on trees. But I mean, I could also recognize that I could have done a lot more research on this ahead of time. So just making that comment, I'll remove it.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. I have Ms. Hale and then Ms. Dream.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, enough time has passed that this is not extremely fresh in my memory. I do remember supporting it. At the time that it came before the committee, I just had a couple comments. We're selling, not giving. We're not giving this to anybody. We're selling it. And it's only 3,000 square feet. And that's really not very much land. I mean, that would be a really small lot if you were trying to do anything with it. Thank you.
Ms. Dream.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'm in favor of disposing of this land and making this motion tonight. I do think it would be harmful given that, you know, we're over a year since they applied to say, well, what's one more meeting? I don't think that's good public process. So I think we should try to avoid that. And further, the subject of every meeting we have is housing. And I think we have to recognize that sometimes that's going to be done by private developers. And I'm guessing that this will help them do that. And obviously with the land sale, we don't get to tell them exactly what to do, but if they have development plans, they will come back to CBJ and we'll see them then, or the planning commission will see them then. So I'm in favor of doing this tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Dream. Anything further? I'll object. I just can't get there. You have 11.6 acres and you need 3,000 square feet of the city, just so you don't have to share a driveway. Sorry, I can't get there. Any further comment? All right, Madam Clerk, you have a motion and objection. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So for the motion to approve the sale of the land to Mr. and Mrs. Reiswig, Ms. Gladysevsky.
Yes.
Ms. Wall,
Yes.
Ms. Treem,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Hughes Candies,
No.
Ms. Hale,
Yes.
Mr. Bryson,
Yes.
and Madam Mayor.
No.
Motion passes 6-2.
All right, item 20. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is hardship and senior citizen disabled veteran nonprofit late filed real property tax exemption applications.
All right, Mr. Manager, I think we'll just skip you on this one and go straight to Ms. Gladysevsky.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say the Assembly has reviewed all 11 applicants for this hardship and late file seniors and done so individually, evaluated each one, and I would move them as follows. I would move that the assessor accept these applications for her review. For hardship list, Alan Togg, Helene Kiso, Kenneth Keppinger. And for the late file senior and disabled veteran exemption list, Don Kubley, Matthew Knutson, Mayumi Gaber, Jagdish Yelesetti, Samuel Hunter, Samuel Pleasance, Scott Shields, and Stephen Seymour. And these were all people who were late in filing with the city. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, that those exemptions move forward. Any staff reports?
The staff reports, thank you.
Okay, assembly reports, since I see lots of yawns, I'll keep mine very short. There's a lot going on in town, lots of things happening. The Polynesians are here, so hopefully people have been able to participate in some of that or gone out to Ock Bay and seen the boat, which I hope to do tomorrow. With that, I will move it on to Committee of the Whole. Ms. Blanchett.
Madam Mayor, I wrote down all the things the committee of the whole did, and now I can't find my piece of paper. But we had a meeting last week and we talked about short-term rentals and city hall bonding. And we heard a presentation from the Juneau Commission on Sustainability regarding Juneau's energy picture and climate action. And we heard about the most recent greenhouse gas inventory. And as was previously mentioned, talked about options regarding regulating short-term rentals. And we have a committee of the whole meeting next on the 26th. And it's not next week, it's the week after. And that's it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Gladysevsky. Finance, Ms. Dream.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We passed the results of a lot of our hard work tonight. So I want to say thank you to the Assembly for hanging in there, and thank you to the finance staff, particularly Ms. Spiegel and Mr. Neesmith, who have to listen to all of our meetings and then listen to them again to do minutes. So thank you to them. It was a really difficult budget. I think that reflects the hard decisions we had to make. I also recognize, I think that there's room for process improvement. So I want to work really hard on that over the next year with the Assembly and with finance staff. I don't think that making those hard decisions is ever going to be super pleasant, but there are probably ways that we can make it better. So my commitment is that I'm going to work on that. And then as for future Finance Committee meetings, I am hopeful that we will be able to cancel the July meeting. It might require Ms. Gladysevsky to allow some shuffling onto her meetings, but hopefully we won't have to have a meeting on July 5th. So we'll see. TBD.
Yeah, I think everybody would support that. I'd be boycotted. Anyway, Public Works, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Public Works and Facilities had their meeting. We discussed cameras in the downtown parking garage. We had a discussion about the landfill. We mentioned the study in 93, the study in 08, and the study in 2015. And we discussed the zero waste plan. The other thing that we did for Public Works and Facilities, we had a listening session for the North Douglas Crossing, the second screening, and we had more than 60 participants come and either come to the room or give testimony for the second crossing or North Douglas Crossing. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson's. Lands, Housing and Economic Development. Ms. Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We canceled the meeting.
Thank you. Short and sweet, like it. Human Resources, Mr. Smith, your committee was busy tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we, the Human Resources Committee earlier this evening recommended to the resolution about changing the CDBJ personnel rules regarding the deferred compensation employer match. We've adopted that in resolution in the consent agenda. I have some appointments I'd like to offer. The Human Resources Committee recommended for appointment to the Bidding Review Board, the appointments of Alexander Smith for a term beginning immediately and ending May 31st, 2024, and Jason Souza for a term beginning immediately and ending May 31st, 2026. So we move that and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? They are appointed.
Very good, thank you. We also made some recommendations for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. We are essentially reappointing the board. So there's 9 members. The Human Resources Committee recommends that the Assembly appoint Michaela Chappell, Christina Mounts, and Chris Myrtle to the new PRAC for start dates beginning immediately and ending April 30th, 2024. We recommended appointment of Josh Anderson, Danica Swanson, and Paulette Shermer with terms beginning immediately and ending April 30th, 2025, and Charles Westmoreland, Emma Van Ness, and Portland Highbow for terms beginning immediately and ending April 30th, 2026. So those are what we recommend, and I ask we appoint them for the dates, terms listed, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objection? Seeing none, they are appointed. Thank you for that, doing that task.
Very good, Madam Mayor. We also discussed the interviewing for members of the Systemic Racism and Review Committee. The committee, the Human Resources Committee actually recommended that we waive the rules of the assembly in our current rules of procedure. We are supposed to sit as the full assembly. The Human Resources Committee sits as the full assembly to conduct interviews for the SRC interviews. We actually felt that the committee is operating kind of normally, and we can maybe just appoint members to it just based on, getting applications like a normal HRC, a standard HRC appointment. So to do that, I would move that the assembly waive its rules regarding SRRC interviews, and instead just allow the Human Resources Committee to recommend appointments to the Systemic Racism Review Committee. I ask for unanimous consent, though we do need 6 votes if we need to vote on that.
I will object for purposes of the questions. Would you have them fill out questionnaires still or just go?
Yes, we do. There is an expanded question sheet that we would ask of applicants.
Okay, I'll remove my objection. Any further objection? Seeing none,
Very good.
so moved.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And then just everyone remember on your calendar, it's looking like I'm hoping we can still maybe do empowered boards on just one night on June 27th. I know the hiring committee has a long meeting that day. We're seeing how many applicants return their questions, and we can see we may have to spill over into Wednesday, the 28th. Is that possible for the assembly? Again, not the desired outcome, but are people's calendars okay for that, should that occur?
I'm looking at the chair of the manager recruitment committee. Are you okay with that? It might be a long day.
I think we had a good conversation about depending on how many candidates. I think if all of the candidates who have applied turn in questionnaires, then I think we'll need 2 days. If only a small section of them do, then one will be fine even with our meeting.
All right, sounds good. Any objection to Mr. Smith's proposal? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Smith?
No, Madam Mayor.
Ms. Treen, do you have a question or something?
I was going to ask about dates and he got there before I could ask.
Perfect. All right. With that,
I'd like to talk about the joint schools.
of course you would. Thank you.
Thank you. The Joint Assembly, Unit School District Facilities Committee met on May 25th, and we talked about we refined or agreed upon the goals for this year. I won't bore you with that right now. We also talked about criteria and variables that will go into a matrix to evaluate school consolidation. So we actually made really great progress. Thank you, Ms. Kester, for your work. Also looked at just generally looked at the 6-year CIP, trying to understand if we need a condition assessment of facilities at this time or later. And we meet again on June 28th.
Yes, busy weeks coming up, that's for sure. Ms. Wall, would you report on the manager recruitment committee?
Yes, we all have our own committees now. Oh, the joy. Thank you. We had a meeting today of the city manager hiring committee, and just wanted to let you know about dates coming up that you some of which you can choose to participate in and others that you will need to participate in. We are looking at July 6th and July 7th for the hiring committee to complete our screening interviews. So that's 6 to 12 candidates via Zoom interviews. We are holding both of those days during the working day, and we'll hopefully not have to use all of those times, but that will be candidate dependent, how many candidates we decide to move forward as a body. So any assembly member are welcome to join for those if they would like. And then after surveying everyone's summer vacation plans, we have settled on the week of July 31st for in-person interviews for the top 3 to 4 candidates with the full assembly. And so we'd be looking at the evenings of that week. We may need to move around some meetings, including a finance committee meeting, to make it all happen, but that would include time for us with the candidates, and the candidates would also do kind of public meetings, time with staff, other activities as well. But we would look to the evenings for the assembly time. And that's,
Yep, and we may have to move the assembly meeting.
yes. And I'm working with the clerk on
So we may have.
on that, and to send out a reminder to you all of those dates so you can hold them on your calendar.
All right. Thank you for that. Mr. Bryson, did you have your hand up? Okay. Ms.
Can I just
Gladys.
ask about dates? I'm gonna scheduling things, so if you might move the assembly meeting, might you move it to when, after that or
We
before?
haven't even talked about that. We just did this today at noon, and I haven't conferred with the clerk or the city manager to see if we even need to have one.
Okay, all right, sounds good, thank you.
All right. Okay, any other committee that I may have forgotten?
I also want to say applications are open, and for the city manager position through the 22nd. Mr. Hargrave is preparing an email for you all that if you want to pass along the opportunity to your networks, people who might know people, to do that soon because he'll close in the next 10 days.
All right, thank you for that. And please pass along to people that you know that might want to apply. All right, so we will move on now to committee and liaison reports, and I'm going to lump in their comments and questions because it's 10:10 and we're all getting a little tired. Mr. Bryson.
Madam Mayor, I'll be as quick as I can tonight. Docks and Harbor discussed their rate lease, the UAS, or the rate increase, the UAS lease. Instead of giving a season ski pass for that UAS, they agreed to like one ski lift ticket. They think that they'll need the Juneau delegation to help sort out that UAS land. They think they're going to need a third party to help discuss that. And they talked about the deck over that celebration is coming up, or the ribbon cutting, and they're trying to start up a Navy League here in Juneau, which is a group for retired mariners. Yeah. I went to a couple of retirements for the police department, Officer Ward and Officer Espenshade. And the week before that, I went and saw Officer Furman's retirement. And then if you look on page 112 of your packet today, there is an extra ordinance in there. It was not on the agenda. It is the ordinance. I was trying to figure out a good way to say it. I would classify it as the continuation of the work that took place last year to develop City Hall. The ordinance that I asked for the city manager or the city attorney to pull together reflected the comments and the information that I gathered while we were in that phase last year. I didn't want to introduce it tonight. I believe in the path that we're going right now, but I also know that there's more opposition this year. There wasn't a organized opposition. The opposition is already organizing for it this year. And so I wanted to still have it available because we still have one more assembly meeting. If we got a little bit down this path and we discovered that sending the exact same project to the voters might be an error, then the second ordinance is ready to go and could be a realistic choice. After all the discussions that we've had about City Hall, to me, at the end of the day, we have to do a City Hall. It's the thing that we're getting the most wrong, the most waste. The ordinance that I put in tonight, go ahead and look at it. It was the response that I got from last year, and I believe that the likelihood that it could pass would be very high if we ran into opposition that is also very high. And so I didn't want to throw too much out there. I didn't want to convolute the issue too much, but I did want you to know that there is a second option if the community opposes the exact same project. I brought back what was a little bit of a lesser project. Thank you for the time and let me speak on that.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had so many things I was going to say in this space, and as always, then it's 10:15, and it's always a rock in the hard place of, do you use this time to say those things that we don't say any other time in a public meeting because I can't talk to you all if we're not in a public meeting, or do I respect the look on everybody's face that says, shut up, we want to go home? I'll start by getting a couple of things out of the way, which is to say I met with Chamber. We had a good conversation. We were mostly talking about the budget back then. It's always good to hear with everything they've got going on. I thought it was interesting that some of them met with the governor about the road, reviving the road project. And the piece that I thought that was interesting was that he was sort of warning members of the chamber about our senator and saying that while he said he supported it, maybe he didn't really support it. So just interesting, revealing. Always good to get insights, but also nice to know that people are meeting with the governor on behalf of our capital city. Eagle Crest, talking about rates, talking about all those things that they need to do in the summer. They're a little sad that they're behind on the gondola, but they're, as always, an energetic bunch. I went to the hospital retreat on Saturday. I think it was some Saturday. And it was revealing of our need to talk more with the hospital board as the whole assembly and the whole hospital board. And it was a really good retreat, working on their strategic plan. And I think Ms. Treem is going to talk with Mr. Solomon Gross, and they're going to get some joint meetings planned because I know we all want another meeting. And I got this last Saturday to go to the Hukalea Polynesian Voyaging Society welcome at Ockrek, and that was truly amazing. And I felt so lucky to be there on a beach for those hours, and it was really just a very special thing. So glad that they are all here in our community. I think I'll, for the good of us all, I think I'll meditate a little bit on some of the things that I wanted to bring up this evening. But they're process things, and how, when there's so many things that I know we agree on, how do we move forward in the best way where we're being our most efficient selves? So I think maybe I'll ruminate on that a little bit more before I offer thoughts. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. Ms. Treem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to save my report on the hospital retreat for another evening, and I apologize. My head is killing me. I've got to get out of these lights. I love you all. It's not personal, but I need to leave.
Thank you, Ms. Treem. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. School board met about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, last shortly before the our state legislature passed the budget. So they are beginning the conversation about how to adjust that budget based on what they now know about the BSA increase. They meet tomorrow, and lots of other things going on, but I won't go into all of it around the school district. But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them offline.
Thank you, Ms. Wall. Mr. Smith.
Madam Mayor, the Juneau Housing and Homelessness Coalition met. They're very thankful for the Assembly for the funding for the Phase 3 Housing First. Also at that meeting, they shared that the point in time count, which counts essentially people who are homeless in Juneau, the official number dropped from 229 to 220. Always issues with data and all that kind of stuff. But overall, I mean, great to at least not see it like shooting up and spiking up. So anyway, obviously more to be done there, but anyway, just wanted to raise that to you. Happy Pride this month. And I was able to attend the U.S. Coast Guard District 17, which is all of Alaska change of command ceremony. Nice to, see a bunch of folks there and be able to speak to the commandant, the head person of the Coast Guard, just letting her know and I imagine support from others on the assembly for Coast Guard families and housing and childcare and the needs that those families experience, as do many of our neighbors, and especially when we get an icebreaker to do what we can to make that work out. So that was nice to be able to go to. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for representing the city for that, and welcome to Rear Admiral Megan Dean. And I believe Mr. Barr was there also. So Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended on June 3rd, just about an hour and a half of that Bartlett retreat, and wished I could have been there longer, but boy, did I have a lot going on. I attended the airport board meeting on the 8th of June. A couple highlights from that. The parking lot work is underway, and they were remarkably successful at getting the cars out of the long-term parking lot before they had to shut it down and move to the new one. So that worked really well. Great coordination going on at the airport with that whole parking lot project. They've got overflow parking. So I think it's important to make sure you can park, but they actually are really doing a great job. So far, so good. They had heard from Delta Airlines about the second crossing. Delta expressed that they were very worried about any Sunny Point crossing, and they were going to coordinate with Alaska Airlines on their comments to DOT. So somehow the airlines didn't hear about this until very late in the process, and they're communicating that. There was a discussion about adding a welcome to Juneau sign in Tlingit to our welcome sign. Lots that's still unresolved about that. And so I've offered to work with a board member and maybe talk with staff about what that might look like, and how that might work and who we need to talk to. I think everybody on the board can agree that it was a complex issue and we need to actually really think about how that process would work. I toured the Disney Wonder on Friday with some people from the community and some people on staff. It was great. And an unannounced drill happened while we were on board, or while we were there for the tour. So they had to reshuffle the tour, which they did flawlessly. But it was a abandoned ship drill, and only the crew had to respond to the drill. But just like that, they had 3 lifeboats out on the water, and it was so encouraging. And it just made me think of the picture of that uncruised boat in Glacier Bay with a Princess lifeboat right next to it, taking everybody off the ship. We've had so many terrible disasters in this state and in this area, and it was just so heartening to see that happen. With the Assembly's consent, I would like to work with Rory and the Department of Law and staff to draft a resolution to bring back to the Assembly, asking DOT to expedite their work on Yandukan Drive, which is the Fred Meyer intersection. So if it's okay with the Assembly, I'd like to work on that resolution and bring it back to you.
And thumbs up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Ms. Gladys.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Juneau Commission on Sustainability met on June 7th, talked about a lot. They're working on their annual report to bring to the HRC. I think it's HRC. Is that where it goes? Well, they're working on it. And they have a lot of active members, and also talk to staff about how staff can staff that committee. Staff had been staffing like all the subcommittee meetings too. And I finally said, like, well, why do you have to go to those? I mean, just make them go and write a memo minutes that say we met and talked about X. So they're working on their, they don't want to stop working, but they also can't take up that much, as much as staff time as they currently are. Staff is being really helpful and really diligent, and they really appreciate it and understand that that can't continue. So I have a question. Thank you. I also attended the Hukolea things we actually skipped over, which was super fun because we didn't have to do bus or anything. So it was very nice to see, and it's a very heartening, as Ms. Hughes Candy said. And I appreciate the work on Yandukin, because we've been getting emails and I couldn't tell anybody where it was on the STIP, and it might not be on the STIP, and we really should at least express our opinions about that. And I appreciate Ms. Hale. She was on the committee, the review committee of that thing or something. So yeah, thank you. And then finally, I have a question. If the manager could speak to about emissions from cruise ships. We're getting a bunch of emails. People are what we are doing about that, and who we're contacting, and that we're not doing nothing, but it's not, yeah, just could you please explain?
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. We have been getting quite a few comments about visible emissions from cruise ships in the harbor. I will have to say it is one company that is struggling. It is Norwegian Cruise Lines. We have been in contact with NCL at the corporate level. We certainly have their attention. We have been in contact with the industry, Cruise Line International Association. We've let them know that we think it's a problem and that they really need to prioritize it. Frankly, I cannot tell why they are unable to improve their emissions. The other member lines have not had trouble. They've let us know the things they've done, primarily using a higher grade of fuel. We have, when we get complaints, we generally communicate with DEC. I do not know that on days that when we have visible emissions from the ships that they are in violation of state standards. That would be a technical question for DEC. And, you know, we don't have air monitoring equipment. We're not trained in what is or isn't a violation. But I do believe that it is a problem for the industry as a whole. Generally, people don't distinguish between the lines and their ability to comply. But I have to say it is one company that is struggling, and it's giving a bad look for our harbor and a bad look for the industry. So anytime we get a complaint, we communicate those complaints to DEC, to the trade organization CLIA, and to the cruise ship company themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. I wrote down NCL admissions because I appreciate you saying that. It is Norwegian Cruise Line, and but as you said, nobody distinguishes, or the public doesn't generally. It's them. What have you heard when you have? Do you have any sense that Norwegian Cruise Line is hearing this, or what do they say to you when you speak to them?
Mr. Watt.
If you've been following the news over the last year or two, Norwegian has had a tremendous amount of staff turnover and restructuring. So some long-term players that we've coordinated with no longer work there. We do have a very good contact. The last I heard was that they did not know why they were having such a hard time. And that they suspected it was some of their older ships were having trouble complying. I will say across the industry that they generally tell us that Juneau is one of the hardest places not to have visible emissions, given that we've got dark green on both sides of the channel. So depending on where you're looking, we're hard. And if you think about other cruise ship ports in Southeast Alaska, you generally don't have that condition. It's certainly not the condition in Ketchikan or Hoonah or Sitka. And Skagway is generally blessed with a lot of wind. So it is, from a perception standpoint, our harbor is difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Wait, anything further, Ms. Glashow?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, with that, a continuation of public comment. The member of the public here says no, thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we are adjourned.